And by the way, if you were unwise enough not to show up today, we are streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. We're joined now for the first hour by the Attorney General, Maura Healey. She's also a Democratic candidate for the nomination for governor. Here to take your questions and ours for Ask the AG. If you've got a question you want to ask of the Attorney General, the number to call or text, remember we have a text line now, 877-301-8097. You can email her at bpr@wgbh.org or tweet her at BOS Public Radio. And by the way, if you're in the audience and want to ask a question, our colleague Aiden is right there. If you go to him and you don't look too scary, there's a decent shot that he'll allow you on the air. Maybe not, I don't know. Maura Healey, it's good to see you. Thanks so much for joining us.
Oh, it's so great to be with you both, and great to be with the live audience, and great to be at Boston Public Library.
Yeah, thank you very much, Attorney General, for coming in. So let's start with something that isn't local, but has some local connections. Your reaction to what happened up in Buffalo, the racial attack on the supermarket there, the murders.
Boy, it is so heartbreaking. It's devastating, and my heart goes out to the families and the survivors, to the Black community here in Boston and Massachusetts and around the country. And, my reaction was, here we are again. It was like the same drill that we went through after Mother Emanuel. Remember just years ago, and it was going through the process of, once again, let's reach out to our team. Let's have our team reach out to church leaders and faith leaders here. Let's reach out to the Black community. Let's engage with folks in our office. Let's check in with. It's like the same drill. And how many times are we going to go through this as a nation? And I think what's particularly upsetting right now is that we've only seen the rise in recent years of white supremacy and bigotry and racism. And I have been a fierce advocate for doing all that we can to end gun violence, and certainly this is part of it, and how it is that this person ended up with his background, with a gun, and what went wrong with the red flag law there is something that needs looking at. But I think the bigger issue and the bigger concern for me is just what's going on with white supremacy and racism in this country. It is on the rise. Last year, the Anti-Defamation League in Massachusetts published a report showing that within Massachusetts, there's been close to a 90% increase on online incidents of white supremacy within Massachusetts alone. It is corrosive, it is killing our society, it is anti-democratic, it is anti-American, and we are at a point in our nation where there has been more focus and attention on 400 years of systemic racism and its vestiges that permeate every realm of our society. There are people of goodwill who are working hard on this, but clearly we have to do a lot more in calling this out. And the tie between a lot of what we're seeing right now, the election deniers and the demagoguery there, the recent the leak of the Roe decision and those who are fighting to cut off women's access to abortion, voting rights. All of this in my mind ties together, and I get really, really upset about it, really emotional about it. That here we are again, and that we have an individual, 18 years old, who purposely set out to hunt down and target and murder Black people at a supermarket in Buffalo, New York. It's terrible.
Attorney General, before we leave this, Marjorie mentioned a local connection. You mentioned what's going on here. That same Anti-Defamation League said that Massachusetts ranks 4th in hate propaganda in terms of states in the whole country. It was only a couple of months ago, Rachel Rollins indicted a guy from Maine for burning a Black church in Springfield, second time in about a dozen years. Philip Martin, our colleague, has done a remarkable research on neo-Nazis here in Massachusetts, this NSC, National Socialist Alliance, I think 121 or something. What are we doing? What should we be doing? What should you be doing? What should the governor be doing around these hate groups in our midst, not some faraway place, right here?
Well, I think we've got to continue to do what we do, and that is to educate, to train law enforcement on identifying and responding, to work with community groups and organizations. I recently, we've seen so many reports of racism, homophobia, anti-Semitism in schools, in hockey rinks, in locker rooms, in playing fields. And I got really mad about that and told my team we're going to do something. So I convened a meeting for athletic directors, principals, coaches, and others. We're going to embark on a series-long training this summer for them, working with Northeastern Center for Sport and Society to get at it. It's an example, Jim, of wherever we see it, we have to call it out and we have to respond. Let me just say something about your comment, because I don't want people in Massachusetts to think that something is happening here disproportionate to other parts of the country. Part of what's happening here and why we have a higher rate of reported hate crimes is because we actually encourage the reporting of that. Law enforcement takes that information and reports it to offices like mine and others. So part of it is, the numbers sometimes may seem more pronounced, but it's because we're actually looking, right? We're actually looking. It's not to say we don't have an issue. And I guess my message is this stuff is so pernicious. It is so pernicious, and it is pervasive. And wherever we see it, we have to call it out for what it is, and we have to hold people accountable. Here in Massachusetts and across this country.
Just one last local follow-up. I would argue respectfully, the Attorney General, that nobody has called out what we've seen in the top reaches of government in Everett. These facts are beyond dispute. A city councilor who is a cousin of the mayor used the N-word in emails. The chief spokesperson for the mayor in a meeting with that city councilor said, why don't you bring some of your, quote, dark friends to the meeting so that we can demonstrate we're not racist.
I'll call it out. He should resign. People like that should not be serving in office. It's quite simple.
Well, actually, we have somebody from Everett, so maybe
it's quite
she
simple.
should speak to it rather than me. Paula is your name. You're from Everett. You're on with the Attorney General. Maura Healey, welcome.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for taking my question.
Sure.
So, can I say something? Or?
Oh, yeah,
Yeah,
you're
go
on with the
ahead.
Attorney General. Speak.
Hi,
Okay.
Paula.
Hi. So, I actually met you at the rally on Saturday.
Yes.
And I actually approached you and asked you why you had remained silent on Everett. And you basically said, what if you have these facts, and then handed me off to your chief of staff, who gave me her card, and I called her multiple times. I emailed her multiple times. I forwarded the video from the Jim Browdy show earlier this week, and never heard back at all. This has been going on for over 2 months. So when you say nip it in the bud, I'm not sure what that actually means, because
Well, Paula, No, I appreciate meeting you, and I met you, and I think when we met at the Common at the abortion rally, you alluded to something going on in Everett. There are a lot of things going on in Everett, so I wasn't aware that you were talking about this particular situation. I will tell you, though, my position is, I read about this, and I think the Globe reported it last
Stephanie
week.
Everett, yeah.
Right? And I read about it, I was outraged. I reached out to my team, actually, in fact, and I've been clear. Somebody like that should not be serving in government. And whenever people, are engaging in that kind of behavior, conduct, it's absolutely unacceptable, and it undermines and it weakens the legitimacy of bodies that are elected to represent and serve the people. And there's no place for racist commentary or action. So, Paula, I stand with you on this, and I would hope that, first of all, when this happens, that people feel comfortable reporting it to the media or to others in government, and that the right steps are taken. And sadly, it seems like somebody doesn't have the decency to know that he should step down. But if he doesn't have the decency to know he should step down, then he should be made to step down.
Paula, thank you for bringing up the subject. We appreciate it. 877-301-8970 is the text or phone number.
Just one thing before we get to the, more of the calls and texts. I think a lot of us thought in Massachusetts that the Massachusetts Constitution would protect us if the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade. Nancy Gertner, she's a former federal judge, and her husband's been with the ACLU for years. They wrote a piece talking about the fact that if the Congress does prohibit abortion, and they're talking about banning it nationwide, that would overrule Massachusetts Constitution, and abortion could become illegal in Massachusetts, even with the protections passed from the Roe initiative, the bill up at the State House. You said that you wouldn't enforce that? How could you pull that off?
Well, I have a lot of respect for Judge Gertner, but I guess I have a different legal view, and let that. I hope the day never comes when that is tested. I'm really clear here that Massachusetts recognizes access to abortion as a constitutional right, and it's now enshrined in law. Thank goodness. And at this moment in our country, what Massachusetts needs to do is be a helper to other states, because within a matter of 3 weeks from the time that decision is issued to 3 months, we are going to cut off access to abortion for over half of the women in the United States of America. And what that means is more women will be coming to states like Massachusetts, particularly like Illinois. Because if you look at the map, a lot of those states where those automatic, they're called trigger bans, are going to happen, it basically, Illinois is this one lone state, and there are going to be so many patients going into Illinois, coming to Massachusetts. We've seen that already in the wake of Texas. And what that means is that patients in Massachusetts also will have more difficulty getting access to appointments. So what do we need to do? Well, my office has been working closely with the legislature and with advocates and organizations who, we've all thought about this, and we need to make sure that we are doing everything that we can to increase and remove any barriers to necessary care here, be ready to protect our providers, protect them from security threats, protect them from efforts to prosecute them or investigate them by other states for their actions, protect them from civil and criminal liability when it comes to licensing or medical malpractice insurance. Because some of these laws, in other states, give private residents, private citizens in those states, the so-called right to go after and investigate providers or those who are assisting others with abortion. So we got to protect our providers. We've got to train more providers, too. I've said for a long time that we don't have enough providers in this country. And we need to work with our medical schools in other programs to train up and get ready more people who are able to provide abortion. In Massachusetts, I credit the legislature not only for codifying Roe, but also expanding scope of practice, allowing physician's assistants, nurse practitioners, nurse midwives to do this work. This is all really important, and I want to send the message now. It is really important that Massachusetts step up in this time and make sure that we are poised to be a helper state, both for the sake of patients here, patients who will be coming here, and also patients who are going to be going to other states where abortion is legal, who are going to be very overburdened in the time to come.
Attorney General, far be it from me to impugn any of your legal skills, but I think it's fair to say if you think that this can't happen in Massachusetts, and a former federal judge who's also an attorney thinks it can happen in Massachusetts, depending on what the federal government does, and enshrining personhood, which is what some of these people are talking about. I think it's
fetus, right?
Yes, I think it's fair
no,
to say that
clear.
there's a legal confusion here about what could happen, which is obviously quite upsetting to people.
No, I mean, look, I'm the person who litigated marriage equality. I know the drill on this, and I know the specter of what is out there, and that's why people got to get damn serious and focused on the consequences of this opinion. I've called for the increase in the business voice, because nationally, I'll tell you, our economy is losing $2 billion every year because of restrictive abortion laws. 500,000 women are not in the workforce because of abortion restriction laws. If you are a woman who is restricted from getting an abortion, you have an 80% increase in the likelihood that you are going to be evicted, that you're going to have to file for bankruptcy, that you are going to have tax liens imposed on you. So to those out there, and I want to say as a Catholic, and the daughter of a woman who goes to church every morning, who incidentally is a school nurse and a health educator and taught sex ed, you can respect religious freedom. You can respect an individual's decision to make a decision for him or herself about what they want to do. But in this country, we also have certain freedoms. And we have to be a place that recognizes and respects the freedom of a woman to make a decision about her own body by herself. And, that's where it is to me. So I'll fight tooth and nail against anyone, but I do want to explain, it also makes no sense in this country right now, just like the anti-immigration policies make no sense. How many businesses across industries are in need of workers at a variety of skill levels? And so what good does it make to shut immigrants out? What good does it do to shut women out from the workforce, which is what you do with these restrictive abortion laws. Because these poor women, are going to end up less likely to go to school, more likely to drop out of school, less likely to join the workforce, to stay in the workforce. You're going to have families, women who already have kids, who are going to be pushed over the cliff and further into poverty as a result. So I am mad about this. I am really angry about this because it is about a disempowerment, a further marginalization of women, and of course the women most devastatingly impacted are women of color. But that's where we are right now, and we have got to absolutely. So it's not to say I minimize the specter of what could happen, with regard to contraception or marriage equality. This is really concerning, but it's all the more reason that we need to do and be very aggressive here in Massachusetts with our protections, and protecting our freedoms. And by the way, we should talk about them as freedoms. These are freedoms. Republicans want to own that word. Well, you know what? These are freedoms too.
We're talking to Maura Healey, the Attorney General of the Commonwealth. Kevin from Cambridge, you are now talking to the Attorney General of the Commonwealth. Welcome to the show, Kevin.
Hi, thank you for taking my call.
Sure.
So Attorney General, thanks for being here and being available to folks. And I don't know that this is accurate, so I just want to lay that out there. My wife had heard that there was a class action lawsuit or something against Navient about deceptive practices through your office, and I was wondering if that was accurate or true, or if I could find out more information about it.
Yeah, if you hang on the line, Kevin, we'll make sure that we follow up with you directly. But my office investigated and took action against Navient, and we actually recently resolved that case. We settled that case, so your wife might be entitled to relief. But as folks may know, over the last 7 years, my office has spent a lot of time going after predatory student lenders, including the Navients of the world, and held them accountable. I actually have a student loan assistance unit in my office where people can call who are in default or struggling with their student loans because they may be eligible for relief. The legislature actually created within my office a student loan ombudsperson, and so we're super active in this space. I actually am going to be speaking soon with the Secretary of Education because honestly, the Biden administration hasn't done enough, and time's a wasting. I need them to act. We've sent a bunch of affidavits and other things asking them to take the executive action of discharging loans, and it's taking too long, so I'm talking to the Secretary of Education about that. I also continue to call for President Biden to exercise his executive authority and discharge loans up to $50,000. Again, this is an economic issue, and it makes a lot of sense.
Did you have student loans?
Sure.
And when did you pay them off?
I paid them off over probably a period of 10 years. But it,
When did you leave law school? What was the number when you left law school? Do you remember?
I don't know what the number was. I mean, it was tens of thousands, probably over 100,000. Sure. But I was fortunate. I had a job that allowed me to do that, and education has just gotten more and more expensive, and the burden is really significant, and we have to find a way to make this work for more of our students. But Kevin, I'm glad you called, and folks should know that remains a resource in our office.
Kevin, don't go away. Stay on hold. We'll transmit your contact info to the Attorney General's office, 877-301-8970.
Jeff from Haverhill, you're on with the Attorney General.
Hello, Jeff.
Hi, thanks for taking my call. So
Sure.
I grew up on back and forth between the border of New Hampshire, Massachusetts, Atkinson, and Haverhill. And my concern is I'm really happy to hear such a good-hearted, smart politician talk so aggressively about fighting all the conservative crap around white nationalism, racism, the abortion issues. Absolutely, go for it. But what sometimes is missing in the conversation, I think, is how much economic disparity is causing millions of people to fall in line with the Republican ultra-conservative movement when if their lives were a little bit better, if the housing costs weren't so extreme, if they didn't barely buy $35,000 a year while billionaires aren't paying any taxes, that's what's unfortunately politically driving so many people to these, what is just the whack job, right-wing people of the Republican Party. So as governor in Massachusetts, what were your plans to help Massachusetts residents and maybe nationally for an income disparity to be reduced, because I think it's really an underlying problem with everything else.
Thank you, Jeff.
Jeff, it's great to hear from you. And I, too, grew up like you, straddling the border of New Hampshire and Massachusetts. My folks are from Newburyport. I grew up by Hampton Beach. As you know, a lot of folks from Haverhill back and forth to Hampton Beach and that whole Merrimack Valley. And, you know, I think that what you point out something that is really, really important right now. And I do think Jeff is right, that it is fueling some of what we see in terms of how people are voting and what is appealing to them in this time. I know my focus right now is on affordability, big time. It's all about affordability in the state. You know, we have real issues with housing, where rents have only gone up, housing costs are just skyrocketing, and the path to home ownership, which is really the only way to accumulate and grow wealth in this country, is just out of reach for far too many. We have a shortage of housing, affordable housing, not just at the lowest income level, but really at a range of income levels. What do we need to do? We need a lot more housing, and I've called for the creation of a lot more housing units. That includes relaxing some of the zoning laws. We need to boost housing around the state. We need to be strategic. We need to have it transit-oriented. We need to have it, oriented close to workplaces and the like. That's the first thing. We also have to deal with childcare, because right now childcare is costing 15, 20, 25 grand per child. It's crazy. People are not able to go to work because they can't pay for childcare. That is holding people back. It is holding our economy back. It's why I support Common Start and legislation that would cap the amount a family has to pay for childcare. It's a fundamental investment, and it goes towards our economic infrastructure. We've got to deal with that. I was over recently, I spent a lot of time in child care centers. I was over recently visiting one in Jamaica Plain, and I heard time and time again from the providers how so many were leaving. Why? Because they're getting paid 17, 18, 20, 22 bucks an hour. Amazon and Target have come to town offering $22, $24, $32 an hour, and I don't begrudge them for making the move. They don't want to make the move, but part of it is we've got to pay our child care providers more. And we need to, Jeff, also think about the relief that we can provide to families right now, the relief that we can provide. And Jeff knows, because it sounds like he and I both grew up, parts of New Hampshire. New Hampshire has a very different way of approaching taxes. For the record, I don't think it works. It's all property-based, and so you end up with people who are really property poor and burdened in New Hampshire. But, you know, we have to make Massachusetts attractive for residents to come and students to come and stay, and also for businesses to continue. Right now, the state with the fastest rate of inbound business is Texas. Even though they have horrible policies that, you know, and don't protect people's rights and do a lot of things that, you know, are not great. Nevertheless, cost of housing, affordability, these are real issues. And so I am acutely focused on this as an issue.
I should know this, but before we take a break, the mayor who runs the city we're not currently in supports some variation on what she calls rent stabilization, rent control, rent stabilization. Do you, as governor, would you sign a rent control bill should it make it to your desk?
I don't think that's the solution. I, of course, support, and my office has advocated. We have been fighting on lawful evictions, on lawful foreclosures, working hard to advocate to make sure our rental assistance program is funded, particularly during this pandemic. And so I support that. Also, as a civil rights lawyer, I used to bring cases against landlords and property managers who didn't want to take Section 8. So, look, I'm a big believer in making sure that those needing rental assistance have support. But I think the way you get there, the overall picture, it's not through rent stabilization. It's through the production of more housing. We need more housing. We need more affordable housing across income levels. And, you know, we need to look to create this statewide. And that's why also our transportation investments become so important. South Coast Rail, East West Rail, building out and better supporting our regional transit authorities. All of this is really important.
How about safety on the T? Do you think Governor Baker's doing enough after the Federal Transit Administration, I would crack down on us, I think is a fair description.
To put it lightly, no, there's something seriously wrong at the MBTA. And the federal government is investigating. I certainly welcome that and support that. There are serious issues. And we need a transportation system that is safe, that is reliable. And the incidents reported are just really alarming. And we need, as a state, get to the bottom of that and steps need to be taken. Obviously.
What should Governor Baker be doing, Attorney General, that he's not doing on
Well, I
the
think
safety front?
I think he's welcomed in the study of the federal administration, and I'm sure that they are looking closely at all of this. But I know there are some systemic issues. But here's the thing, Jim. I talk a lot about our move away from fossil fuels. One of the ways we're going to get people away from fossil fuels is to get them out of their cars. You cannot expect people to not take their cars when you don't have a commuter rail or a T that runs on time, that is running routes at times that actually work for workers, and that's safe. And so it is both an environmental imperative and certainly an economic imperative, because we've got to have a better transportation system. And my heart goes out to the Lynn family for. I mean, imagine if your son was dragged along a platform for 100 feet and not even noticed, for a long period of time, because that train went all the way out to Alewife, I think, before returning. This just shouldn't happen. But you've read the stories. I mean, we've got trains that are super old, investments not made, management issues over time, and this has got to be addressed immediately.
Just one quick thing before we go to the break. When the state was having the Department of Public Utilities look into the future of natural gas in the state of Massachusetts, the DPW, oddly to me anyway, gave responsibility for the blueprint to the gas companies. You have had something to say about that. What'd you say?
I've had a lot to say about the future of gas for a long time, and I credit the work of my team, which has really been to dig into what needs to happen and to push the utilities to do their part in this space. If we're going to move from fossil fuels to renewables, we need collaboration. We need everyone at the table. And our report showed a few things. One, we need to do a better job of pushing the utilities in their efforts to do things like help us with modernizing the grid, interconnectivity. That is the way that wind or other things coming in, that the energy coming in actually gets then transmitted out. And these are things that we need the utilities' help on. And I said that I welcome everyone at the table, including labor, by the way, which understandably had some concerns. What are the jobs for the current pipe fitters and electricians and others? And you know what? We've had a lot of conversations, and we're going to get there. Because the fact of the matter is, in Massachusetts, we have an opportunity to be the nation's offshore wind capital of the world. We have the opportunity to be a global epicenter for clean energy technology, climate security. Understand that right around us in Cambridge and Boston, we have companies that are right now innovating and developing the technologies that are going to be used in this space around the world. And we've got a wonderful research in academia, from UMass Lowell stretching all the way through Worcester down to Woods Hole, entities that are studying. Greentown Labs in Cambridge, which is an incubator that's spawning and has spawned so much development. So the opportunities are real. The jobs are significant. And that's why I think we need a climate chief in an administration who can sit atop and make sure that we are driving a climate agenda across our Department of Transportation, of Housing, of Economic Development, and beyond. It's why we need to quickly work to electrify our public transportation. I've called for the massive ramp up of electric vehicle charging infrastructure, because while I call for 1 million electric vehicles by 2030, that's not going to work unless we have a way to actually power them, charge them, and in particular figure out, it's one thing to have EVs in the suburbs where there's space and you can plug in at a home. How do you do it in this concentrated area right here? And what intention? We need to bring some intentionality around that.
Quickly, did you support this natural gas peaker plant in Peabody? We've discussed
No,
it.
we've been fighting that for a long time.
Okay.
Yeah,
We got to take a
Take a
break.
break. We're talking with the Attorney General Maura Healey. She's with us until the top of the hour. You're listening to 89.7 GBH, Boston Public Radio. We are broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library.
Next time on The World, governments in Western Europe welcome people fleeing from Ukraine, but reject people fleeing from Africa.
And they've been forced back into detention centers that have been compared to concentration camps.
This reporter investigated those detention centers in Libya.
There's pretty much every kind of atrocity you can imagine taking place there.
A double standard for migrants on The World.
this afternoon at 3, here on GBH News 89.7.
Funding for our programs comes from you and the Office of the Massachusetts State Treasurer. The Unclaimed Property Division is holding unclaimed funds for the citizens and businesses of the Commonwealth. You can see if you have unclaimed money at findmassmoney.com. And Mass Autobahn, where you can get outdoors and experience wildlife sanctuaries across the state, from the Cape to the Berkshires. You can join today. The adventure starts at massautobahn.org.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy, Marjorie Egan. We are live at the Boston Public Library. We are streaming on youtube.com/GBH News. But again, I have no idea why you're not here, but that's your decision. If you just tuned in, we are currently talking to the Attorney General, and you are too, Maura Healey. She's here at the top of the hour to take your calls and questions at 877-301-8097. It's also our text number. And by the way, at noon, if you don't know already, we're joined by the Secretary of Labor in person here. That would be the former mayor of Boston, Marty Walsh.
You know, Attorney General, before we get back to the phones and the emails, we have a lot of stories in the Commonwealth about police departments hiding bad activities, sometimes even illegal activities from the public, including the Boston police and the state police. Now we have another story about what seems to be special treatment of the state police from the son of the head of the state police, Christopher Mason. Andrea Estes reported on this in the Globe. The cops arrested him down the Cape. He was allegedly drunk, hanging out of the car, 4 guns in the car. I'm just going to explain this so people get the background here. This happened February 28th. The cops in Barnstable didn't even submit a report on this till April 29th. The Boston Herald had to file an appeal with the court down there to open up a hearing which would have been closed. Normally, police reports are public record. As a reporter, you could get the police report right after it happened. This is extremely unusual, and we've had a lot of stories about the state police. So what's happened now is that reporters call the governor's office, they get no answer. They call the state cops, they get no answer. It certainly seems as though the son of the head of the state police is being treated very differently, unlike anybody else would be treated. And this is a continuation of stuff we have at the state cops. The basic question is, your opponent, Sonia Chang Diaz, who was in here last week, talked about how you've not been good on police accountability. If you were the governor, would you say to Christopher Mason, the head of the state police, he's got to okay the release of this report, number one, and if it's found that he intervened, should he have to resign? Release the report, and should he resign if he intervened?
So I think my record has been pretty clear. Some people may know I indicted 13 police officers for the city of Springfield. That's just one of any number of cases I've brought against police officers who have engaged in unlawful activity. I opened up an investigation years ago. You may remember what happened in Worcester County with a judge and the DA and a woman there. And you know, we have time and time again taken these issues on. I haven't been afraid to look. As a matter of law enforcement, you know, people need to trust the integrity of these systems. So I've taken my role really seriously. I've also been a big supporter of criminal justice reform and police reform, and was strongly behind the creation of the Post Commission that's now been set up, where Massachusetts, for the first time, catching up with other states, will be able to certify and decertify police officers. And we've invested a lot in training and education as well. So that's my position. I'm going to continue to do that. I come to this job, and I approach any job having been a civil rights lawyer for many, many years, and never having been one to be afraid to stand up to the most powerful interests in the country or in the world, and always been a champion for looking out for those who are vulnerable, those who are marginalized, and I'm going to continue to do that.
But should he, if he intervened on behalf of his son, should he be running the state police, and should all these officials in state government basically seem to be covering up this police report?
I don't know the specifics of the situation. Nobody knows the specifics of the situation, so I'm not going to answer hypothetical, but I will say that obviously nobody should be interfering with something improperly, but I haven't seen any evidence of that in this matter. I think that the broader point I'm trying to make is that I take very seriously the operation of government, and that people, I know in my job, we're held to a particularly high standard, as we should be by the public, and I would make sure that happens with anyone with whom I work or serve with.
Okay, well,
I want to be clear about. Oh, sorry.
We'll end this, but it's absolutely clear he's being treated differently. This would not be withheld from the public. Many people have tried to get a closed hearing. The governor doesn't want to talk about it. State cops don't want to talk about it. So it's very clear that this is not how anybody normally would be treated. And this isn't the last. You know that Mason was in trouble before for allegedly
No, I don't.
being involved with looking the other way, involving a cheating incident for cops to get on the force. So it doesn't really give you confidence that when you get pulled over on the Mass Pike, who is this person pulling you over? You know what I mean?
Well, as I say, my record, I think I've gone after any number of state police troopers as well. When it came to overtime, my record's clear there, and I will continue to make sure that happens. With respect to this incident, I just don't. As I understand it, he was found asleep in his car, and
With 4 guns. That were not
these are
safely.
questions. I would assume people are asking the DA and the police department for this information.
A question from the audience here at the library. With COVID on the rise, should a mask mandate return, Attorney General?
I don't think we're there, but I also think we're at a point, Jim, as a practical matter, people are making their own decisions, mandate or not. I mean, I just returned from a meeting in Atlanta, and honestly, it's just different. I mean, people on the plane a few months ago are wearing masks. So many people are not wearing masks. I encourage people to take precautions for themselves, particularly if they have loved ones at home with compromised conditions, seniors. I mean, it's hard to tell. I know it's hard to tell people what to do, but I do want to impress upon people that this variant that's out there, we've seen many more cases. They seem to be manifesting in some different ways. You've heard some people say they continue to test positive for a while. And thank goodness that we have the vaccinations and the boosters here, because I think that absolutely has made it better for people in terms of experiencing some of those systems. But clearly this stuff is real, and I just encourage people to really take precautions.
Kelly, you're in the car somewhere, and you're on with Attorney General Maura Healey. Thank you much for calling, Kelly.
Thank you for taking my call.
Sure.
I just wanted to ask the Attorney General if she's doing anything to stop age discrimination. I'm a 60-year-old woman who got laid off during COVID, and every application I've filled out has asked what year you graduate from high school. And I think that is aging me out in the process, and I never get return call. And I feel that's age discrimination asking that question.
Oh, Kelly, that's a really interesting point, and also an interesting question. I mean, I think when we fill out job applications, we're used to, your education history, but not specifically your year of graduation. So, in this time, Kelly, I would, if you have concerns, you feel free to report directly to my office. Employment discrimination generally is reported to something, by law, it has to go first through the Mass Commission Against Discrimination. But we have an aging demographic, and there's no place for age discrimination in our society or in the Commonwealth.
Can she get guidance from your office about what the process is? I mean, the MCAD thing?
Yeah, absolutely, because there are rules that
Okay.
if you have an employment discrimination like that based on age or gender or whatever, you need to actually file first at the MCAD. But Kelly, we can absolutely get you that information. And no, Kelly, I'm talking to employers every day. There is certainly no shortage of jobs out there that need to be filled. And I wish you the very, very best in your pursuit.
Kelly, when you call the Attorney General's office, say you spoke to the Attorney General and she suggested you call. Attorney General, another COVID-related question, which is maybe the hardest one of this whole last couple of years. I've been using the number 76 veterans dead because of COVID, and when I met the other night on television, the lawyer representing 40 of the families, plus the daughter of a man who was there 16 years, and then died, I think it was in April of last year. I was told that there are actually 84 veterans who lost their lives. The state recently entered a $56 million settlement with those 84 families. What did you think of that deal?
Well, it wasn't something that our office was involved in. It was the administration with the plaintiff's counsel. I was glad to see a resolution, having talked to the plaintiff's lawyers. They were pleased with it. It doesn't bring back the loss. There's no way to put a price on that. And so the pain continues for those families, and my heart goes out to them. And I think the obligation is to make sure that everything is done to ensure that that never happens again. As you know, Jim, I criminally prosecuted actors associated with the Holyoke Soldiers Home. And, the judge didn't think that we had the case. I'm appealing it, and I'm going to continue to fight for those families.
Why were you not representing the state? It never occurred to me until you just said this. Why were you not? Isn't that part of your job?
When you have a conflict, I criminally prosecuted the
Oh, I
Soldiers
see.
Home, right?
You know-
I couldn't do both.
I see.
So what happens is we give opportunity and we sag it out. We give
To
a
the private
special.
sector.
Yeah.
Lori Bodette was the name of the woman who was on my show who, it's so tragic, visited her father every single day for 16 years. And then I think it was in April of, I may get the date wrong. No, it was March, late March. She didn't see him for a month and only got to see him one more time a month later before he died. It's just a horrible story. I asked her how she felt about the settlement. Did it bring closure, as the governor said he hoped it did? And she went on to say that she thought there had not been adequate accountability all the way up the ladder, as far up as the governor. Do you? And she laid out some of the things we all know, from only interviewing one candidate, that he didn't have the qualifications, that the so-called the Pearlstein report commissioned by the governor ignored the fact that there were emails suggesting the Secretary of Health and Human Services knew what was going on, but it's omitted from the Pearlstein report. Do you think that adequate responsibility has been taken by the governor and Secretary Sutters for these, whatever role the administration played in these 84 deaths?
Well, I understand where Lori is coming from and families out there, because, it's just, it would just kill you. You would be so angered knowing that your father, your loved one, died under these circumstances. And so I totally get that. And it's why I said, Jim, well, the settlement is a settlement. It brings some resolution. It never is going to make anybody feel entirely better. I understand that. And in terms of accountability, look, I know what I know through our office's investigation, and so I have to be limited in what I say. But I've certainly pushed as much as I can there. The legislation now has an opportunity to make some structural changes to the way we treat our veterans, and that includes what's going to happen with the construction of Holyoke Soldiers Home, which is now going to be reconstructed, but also Chelsea. And then, contemplation of a whole new effort to put someone outside of Health and Human Services as a separate secretary or cabinet head for service members and veteran services here in the Commonwealth.
Let's go to Bruce in Westboro. You're on with the Attorney General. Welcome to the show. Hi.
Hi, thanks for taking my call. I have
Sure.
a simple question for the Attorney General, which I've never heard addressed. And this regards the laws like the ones in Texas, which allow random citizen A to sue anyone that he knows has aided or gotten an abortion. I thought one of the basic requirements of suing someone is you have to have standing. Where is the standing in these situations?
That's a great question.
Can you explain what standing is for listeners, please, before you answer?
Oh my God, you want me to put on a real lawyer hat?
Do the best you can here, yeah.
Bruce, thanks for the call. So standing is this concept in the law, which basically says you have a right to sue somebody when you've experienced a harm. You have to experience a harm. You can't just be complaining about a situation. The city's dirty, it's polluted river, unless you are experiencing some sort of harm direct to that. And that's sort of the concept of standing. And Bruce, it's a great question. There's so much wrong with that law, including basically creating, for the first time in our nation's history, bounty hunters out there, private citizens, vigilantes, who can investigate, interrogate, prosecute citizens in other states or in their own state. So that's just crazy, Bruce. I don't know how to explain that. And I don't know how to explain standing in this case. I really don't, Bruce. The whole thing is so wrong. It is so messed up. Unfortunately, we have a Supreme Court that we have right now. And so, that's why I encourage people at the state level all around this country to do as much as they can to ensure access to abortion, to ensure that our LGBTQ kids aren't beat up or terrorized or victimized, and to make sure that, in the wake and in the face of what we're seeing. Going into the midterms, looking ahead the next couple of years, it is really, really scary what's happening out there. I just came back from a meeting with other AGs, and the number of election deniers who are running for statewide office in states across this country is terrifying. and you think about Wisconsin, Arizona, Nevada, Michigan right now, you think about the Electoral College, the notion that there are state legislatures right now that are drafting rules that basically, and taking this issue to the court, to the Supreme Court, basically saying no matter what the voters in our state do, we as a state legislature are going to have the power to certify an election and take that control away from election officials. It's really horrifying.
You know, we had this brilliant Senator McMorrow that's become a national sensation, the state senator from Michigan, with us the other day, who gave that viral, brilliant speech against those grooming accusations that some fool in the Senate did. And we talked to her. For people who think this is just rhetoric, the likely Republican candidates for Secretary of State and Attorney General in her state of Michigan both believe that Joe Biden is not the legitimate president of the United States. So I mean,
yeah, but this is the deal, Jim, and this is why I want people to wake up. The federal races are really important, but the fate of our democracy is going to be determined by who is elected in November, Secretary of State, Attorney General, and Governor in states across this country. Also, who your election commissioner is, your county commissioner is. That's where the action is. That is going to determine whether or not we have a democracy and whether or not we have a true electoral college vote. That is the case. And in all of those states, my point is, those positions, I was just with my colleague, General Dana Nessel from Michigan. Jocelyn Benson is coming into town, the Secretary of State for Michigan. She's getting awarded a Profiles in Courage Award this weekend at the Kennedy Library. In all these states, people like their opponents are running. Look at the guy from Pennsylvania.
Mastriano, the governor
So this is,
candidate.
unfortunately, this is just where the Republican Party is. My colleague, Lawrence Wasden, who's a Republican, we disagree on just any number of policy issues, but he is a man of integrity, and we've worked well together over the years. 4 terms as Attorney General in Idaho. He was one of 8 Republican attorneys general who refused to sign that brief in the Supreme Court to decertify the election. He got primaried. He lost by 20 points. Wow. And that's just where we are right now in this country.
Didn't Senator McMorrow said she had a bulletproof vest?
She wore a bulletproof vest to work, or she brings one with her to work.
She's a 35-year-old mother of small kids.
Yeah.
We have another
It's terrifying.
question from the audience. Is Rick around? Where are you, Rick? Make it good. Well, he's almost like in Somerville. Rick, hurry the hell up, will you please?
He's running over to the microphone. Thank you, Rick.
And we don't care if you're out of breath. Just speak.
I used to like to go fishing off the coast in Mass, the Bay State. But the cod population and other population of game fish has been decimated by commercial fishing. So how can the state of Massachusetts better enforce commercial fishing regulations off the coast so that sport fishermen have a chance to get more than 1 cod at a time?
Well, I want you to do. Where do you fish out of?
Out of Gloucester, or mostly out of there, or sometimes New Bedford, so both north and south.
Great. Well,
thank you, Rick.
Thanks, Rick. And you know, our fishing heritage and industry is so important, and I've long time been an advocate for that industry. Cod is up, actually, in some places. Our stock is, as a result of some of the regulations, I think. NOAA has more control over these things. I think what we've got to do is find ways in this state to work together and to support our industries. And, you know, it has been, as I say, a thriving part of our culture and our history. New Bedford, of course, has more landings than anyone in the country for scallops. I was just down there the other day in New Bedford in Fall River, your hometown, Marjorie. And it is a terrifically important industry for our state. So I think, Rick, you know, I've been a strong proponent for environmental protections and also recognition that this is a way of life, an important industry economically for our families and also for our culture.
I want you to know that the Fall River Herald News listed the 10 most prominent people to ever come out of Fall River.
Thank you, Jim.
Do you know who was on that list, Attorney General?
Marjorie Egan.
Marjorie Egan.
It's
Speaking of Marjorie
a short
Egan,
list.
I'm going to do, Attorney General, I'm going to do her, we're only almost out of time, I'm going to do her a big favor. She wanted to really get into it with you over the Celtics. She is obsessed, And I told her, you can't do that. And now I feel bad for her.
No,
Why?
So
Why would you
throw
say
her
that?
a bone because we're supposed
No,
to
we
be...
just. I listen. I'm a fair weather friend. They're doing great.
Fair weather fan.
That's right, fair weather fan
Thank you.
or friend or
Whatever
whatever.
it
The
is.
Celtics, but it has been really fun watching them, especially last night when
at
they
her.
just
Look at
crushed
her.
the Miami Heat. And you're a big basketball star, so you must be loving this.
Well, I'm not a star, but I'm a huge fan. I love this team. I think their coach has them all playing together and playing hard. And when one is down, another steps up. They've been really exciting to watch, and I'm totally in and have been. And Durfee, you're a Durfee graduate.
Durfee,
Whoa.
yeah.
So Durfee,
Yeah.
everyone should know, is a legendary basketball school, produced any number of outstanding athletes, including Chris Herron, who played for
Yes.
the Celtics.
Indeed.
And it's a great, great school. I was down in Fall River the other day.
You said so. You said nice things.
I did. I'm a big believer. The
Oh,
whole South
good.
Coast. This is what I mean. We've got an opportunity in Massachusetts to take off, and to support and grow these regions and to bring prosperity. And I see it happening in New Bedford. I see it happening in Fall River, and we can see it happen and grow. Look at Worcester. I was at Polar Park in the Canal District a few weeks ago. Great things happening there. We've just got to figure out a way to make sure that we are doing all that we can across the regions. But anyhow, I love Fall River. I stopped at Portugal Market. And
Oh my
listen to
God,
this.
Portugal Market is great.
it was so good.
Really inexpensive.
Did you go in
Portuguese
that room
wine.
where they have all the cod?
Yes, but and all the Charisse, of course, in Fall River. It's a great restaurant.
Can Marjorie call you during tomorrow night's game rather than calling me? Is that okay?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, fine. You can call the Attorney General. Attorney General, it's really good to see you. Thank you so much for your
Attorney
time.
General
I appreciate it.
should demonstrate sometime how she can balance a basketball on the top of her finger. I saw her do that on your TV show,
Yes, she
Jim.
did pretty well.
Okay.
Thanks, Attorney General.
All right,
appreciate
great to
it.
see you both. Have a
Thank
good
you.
weekend.
Thank you
Take
very
care.
much, Attorney General, for being with us. Really appreciate it. We have been speaking with the Attorney General of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and we very much appreciate her time. Of course, she is running for governor on the Democratic side. Thanks again to the Attorney General for being here with us. Coming up, we're going to talk to the mayor of Boston. Well, he used to be the mayor of Boston. Now he's a real big deal. He's Secretary of Labor in the United States of America. He heads the U.S. Department of Labor. Marty Walsh is here next, live at the Boston Public Library. You're listening to 89.7 GBH. If you want to come down, the mayor's going to be here, or the former mayor, I should say. He's going to be here in just a few minutes. Again, you're listening to Boston Public Radio. Thanks.
I'm Frank Oglesby, voice of the T. The doors are opening for Smart Conversation with Jim Browdy and Marjorie Egan on Boston Public Radio. Local perspective, local voices. Welcome aboard, Boston's local NPR.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you and Boston Ballet, presenting Swan Lake, an iconic and beloved ballet live at the Citizens Bank Opera House, May 26th through June 5th. Tickets at bostonballet.org. Falstaff is up to his usual tricks, but in this Shakespeare adaptation, these wily wives of South Harlem outwit him in a celebration of black joy, laughter, and vitality. Watch great performances, Merry Wives, tonight at 9 on GBH2.
Trusted, local news. This is 89.7 WGBH, WGBH HD1 Boston, online at gbhnews.org. Boston's local NPR.
The Kendall Square Orchestra will discuss this week's Symphony For Science, which will raise money for a group called the Science Club for Girls. We'll find out about that and get some music from a handful of the players right here at the Boston Public Library. All that ahead, 89.7 GBH Boston Public Radio.
Live from NPR News, I'm Lakshmi Singh. President Biden's on a mission to deepen U.S. ties in Asia, where China's military and economic presence is expanding. First up, a Samsung semiconductor plant in South Korea, similar to a massive one the company's building in Texas.
We'll create 3,000 new high-tech jobs in Texas and add to 20,000 jobs Samsung already supports in the United States of America.
The U.S. and its South Korean ally are also watching to see if North Korea conducts ballistic or nuclear missile tests during Biden's visit to Asia. The Biden administration is also deeply entrenched in the security crisis it's playing out in Eastern Europe. The U.S. preparing to send nearly $40 billion in additional assistance to Ukraine to help the country fight Russia's invasion. Separately, Russia's defense minister says that nearly 2,000 Ukrainian soldiers fighting to hang on to the Ukrainian port city of Mariupol have surrendered. NPR's Joanna Kakissis reports from Kyiv. There are also reports that some Ukrainian soldiers are refusing to give up, and they're still holed up under a massive steel plant.
NPR News, Kyiv.
A grand jury in New York State has indicted the 18-year-old white man accused of killing 10 black people during a shooting rampage in Buffalo. NPR's Cheryl Corley reports, while the grand jury's investigation continues, some relatives of the victims are now speaking out.
Their grief was overwhelmingly visible. The relatives of the people who died so violently in a Buffalo supermarket. Mark Talley said he last spoke with his mother, 62-year-old Geraldine Talley, on Mother's Day. The 12-year-old son of Hayward Patterson put his hands over his face and cried. And Robin Harris, the eldest daughter of 86-year-old Ruth Whitfield, raged at the gunman who took her mother's life.
What am I supposed to do now? I keep seeing her face coming up everywhere I look. How dare you!
The first funeral for the 10 victims is today. Cheryl Corley, NPR News, Buffalo, New York.
It's NPR.
From the GBH Radio Newsroom in Boston, I'm Judy Ewell with the local stories we're following. Attorney General Maura Healey says an Everett city councilor accused of making racist slurs should resign. City Councilor Anthony DePiro used racist language and messages with city officials. Healey says DePiro should be made to step down if he won't do it on his own.
Somebody like that should not be serving in government. And whenever people, are engaging in that kind of behavior, conduct, it's absolutely unacceptable, and it undermines and it weakens the legitimacy of bodies that are elected to represent and serve the people.
Healey also says the government needs to do more to train law enforcement about white supremacists and hate groups following the racially motivated mass shooting in Buffalo last weekend. Healey is running for governor against her fellow Democrat State Senator Sonia Chang Diaz and Republican Jeff Deal. The Baker administration says COVID-19 booster shots are now available for children ages 5 to 11 at vaccination sites across the state. The CDC recommended yesterday that children in that age group get the Pfizer booster following FDA approval. The children are eligible for a booster 5 months after their last vaccine. The CDC says most of Massachusetts remains at high risk for COVID. Boston's community positivity rate is now 11.5%. In sports, the Celtics host the Heat Saturday night. The Sox host the Mariners tonight at Fenway. Partly sunny skies this afternoon, highs in the 70s. A chance of showers overnight, lows in the 60s. Sunny for Saturday and Sunday with highs in the 90s. A heat advisory is in effect for this weekend. Then stormy weather late Sunday cools us off. It's 66 in Boston.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include DuckDuckGo, a privacy company committed to making privacy online simple. Used by tens of millions, they offer private search and tracker blocking with one download. DuckDuckGo, privacy simplified.
And for more original reporting, visit gbhnews.org.
Welcome back to hour number 2 of Boston Public Radio. He is Jim Browdy. I am Marjorie Egan. We are broadcasting live as we do every Tuesday and Friday from the Boston Public Library. And we have somebody pretty famous right here with us right now.
No, I'm here every day. I mean, it's not, I try to be here. I was off yesterday, but thank you for saying that. Our next guest, I assume you weren't talking about him, used to lead the city as mayor, was a regular here on Boston Public Radio, reporting to the people of Boston. Now he reports directly to the President of the United States as the Secretary of Labor. Please join us in welcoming Secretary Walsh.
Thank
you.
you.
Do you have a hard time finding this place or no?
I found it pretty good, but it's I miss being here. It's exciting. I'm excited
Great,
to be here
isn't it?
today. I'm really excited.
We're excited to have you.
It's a great locale.
For those of you listening, I get so excited. I hugged Marjorie when I walked in.
Marjorie had her mouth full of her sandwich,
That's
too.
nice.
I was very
Very
embarrassed,
classy,
shoving
Marjorie.
the food in during the commercial breaks. I shouldn't say Mr. Mayor, Mr. Secretary.
Hey, before we start, by the way, we had no idea that the Secretary would be willing to take phone calls or texts, but he offered to do it. So if you'd like to speak to the former mayor, now the Secretary of Labor, for a little more than a year for the United States, the number to text or call is 877-301-8970. I'm sorry, Marjorie.
So, Secretary Walsh, I think people knew what you did when you were the mayor of Boston, but I think, I know, Don, I've been reading about you that you can waltz unannounced into the vice president's office, Kamala Harris, and chit-chat. I know that the president called up your mom. Unfortunately, he got the answering service when he called. But those are the fun things. But what do you do as a Secretary of Labor? Tell people.
It's a lot of different things. One, it's obviously advocating on behalf of the administration, both in Washington and around the country. I do a lot of traveling. I've traveled to 37 states, probably nearly 100 cities in my time since being secretary. It's administrative in the office. You run an office of about 16,000 people,
Wow.
Similar to the same size as City Hall, working along with the Deputy Secretary, Julie Sue from California. We have a great relationship, working to make sure she handles the budget and the operations and making sure that the different departments are doing their thing. It's similar to being a mayor in the sense of, you're coordinating efforts to make sure things are working properly. Under our jurisdiction is vast. I recommend you go onto the website, but we have a women's bureau that works on women's issues, on pay equity and other issues. We have a veterans bureau that works on veterans issues and homelessness and getting veterans jobs. We have OSHA for job safety, MSHA for mine safety, EBSA for pensions and all of the benefits. We have wage and hour. So really what we came up with, the tagline is we empower workers morning, noon, and night. From the time you wake up in the morning as a worker to the time you go to bed at night, from your first job ever to the last day you work and after, the Department of Labor represents you in making sure your benefits are there and the conditions are good and things like that.
Secretary Walsh, I read that you, the Vice President, and the President of the United States met with Chris Smalls, the legendary leader of the victorious Amazon organizing effort at Staten Island. Obviously, we've been talking a lot about, and to some of the baristas at Starbucks that have organized here and around the country. A lot of people think this is emblematic of a surge in unionization, which has been on the decline. Others worry, and I'm among them as a former union person, that it's aberrational. It's great, but aberrational. Where do you fall in this?
No, I think there's a potential to be long-term. I really do. And like you, I think about, is this a short-term stint or is it going to be long-sustaining? And I do think it's long-sustaining. I think that when you look at poll numbers in America where 70% of the people polled look favorably upon organized labor, that's the first time. That's the highest it's ever been, probably since vote no on question 2 in 1988 in Massachusetts. You think about that. I met with Chris. We met with Chris and 5 other organizers from different industries in the country, and there really is a feel. I think workers, we'll probably talk about it, but when you think about where we are, last month we had 4.5 million quits in America. People left their job looking for better jobs. We're having a lot of conversations around the future of work, what it looks like here in America, with people that are not going to settle for just an average job anymore. They're looking for something better. And I think collective bargaining, organized labor helps and assists in that. And I think that we're going to see more and more organizing. I want to say organizing, the drives are up 57% this year.
We're going to get to calls in a minute at 877-301-8970. I want to stay on this for a minute, though. One of the things that candidate Biden talked about was, as president, should he be elected, which he was, reforming some of the laws that affect the National Labor Relations Board and organizing workers. No captive audiences, meaning an employer can't order you to go to a one-on-one or that kind of meeting. card checks. If you have a majority of people signing a card in a bargaining unit, you don't have to go through an election and all the anti-union stuff. Reclassification so that people that employers try to make into subcontractors when they're really employees, and there's a ballot question here dealing with that, as there was in California. How are these things been shelved by the president, or what's the deal?
They haven't been shelved by the president. A lot of it was in the PRO Act, obviously.
PRO Act, right.
And the PRO Act right now it passed the House, and it's over in the Senate. But one of the issues is you need 60 votes to pass the legislation in the Senate, and we don't have the 60 votes. So the president is looking to get some components of it in other pieces of legislation. And also, we're looking in the Department of Labor and other ways of whether it's rulemaking or ways of trying to do some of those. But in saying all that, coming out of the labor fields as a union member and the head of the building trades, I think the laws are great to make the level of the playing field to some degree. But I still think that as organized labor knows that they have an obligation to not sit back on their laurels and just let it happen. Go out and be aggressive and organized.
Speaking of the 60 votes in the Senate, I'm assuming that just like you can walk into the vice president's office unannounced and spend an hour, you walk into Joe Manchin's all the time just to talk to him?
I talked to Senator Manchin 2 days ago.
Did you really?
Yeah, I did.
About what?
About some votes on the floor.
What votes?
No, just approval of some of the people in the Department of Labor. But I have the relationships I have. I pride myself on being able to have relationships, and I don't agree necessarily with everything that Senator Manchin's voted against, obviously. But he's a hardworking person. I was in West Virginia with him. I went down to a coal mine with Senator Manchin, myself and Dan, and it was a really amazing experience. I've spent time talking to another Senator Sinema. She was here in Boston during Marathon Weekend. I happened to be getting recognized by the BAA, and I was talking to her there. I talked to Senator Burr, Braun, Sullivan from Alaska, Republican, Markowski from Alaska. I talked to her 2 days ago. Collins from Maine. So I spent a lot of time. I put aside the Republican-Democrat thing, and I try to build those relationships so that we can collectively work together. There's a lot of issues that we collectively should work together on.
Is President Biden ready to strangle Joe Manchin?
I don't think so. I think, President Biden, one thing President Biden prides himself on is working bipartisan across the aisle. And he was able to pass the largest infrastructure bill in the history of our country, $1.2 trillion, by talking to both sides.
But one of the things, Secretary Walsh, is that that there was so much enthusiasm, especially here in Massachusetts, for Joe Biden, and we were all very happy. Now, here and across the country, he has really lost support from people. And I think part of it is the idea that Joe Manchin is kind of stood in the way of almost everything he wants to get done post the initial bill that you talked about, and he may be a very nice guy. I think Biden has been hurt a lot by this idea that you have one senator or two senators holding up his agenda. What are we missing that you see in Joe Biden?
Well, I think, when you think of President Biden, I think about more than the infrastructure bill. I think about the rescue plan. I think about 8.6 million people going back to work. I think about 450,000 more manufacturing jobs in America. I think about all the things that he's been able to do as president. I just think the average person that I'm looking at right now in the audience here, people are concerned about inflation. People are concerned about the economy. People are concerned about, even though wages are up 5.5% across year over year, we have inflation that's about 8%. That's higher than the inflation. And, the president had a plan last year to get Americans back to work, and it's the fastest recovery in the beginning of any presidency. Unemployment claims right now are the lowest since 1969. However, we are dealing with inflationary pressures, and he's looking at us as an all-of-government approach. And one piece that I have in the inflation area is supply chain, making sure that the ships are coming in from China, making sure they're being unloaded in L.A. and Long Beach. Most of the challenges with supply chain are on the West Coast. There's some on the East Coast. So we're working to alleviate those pressures. And then we can't lose sight of two things. Well, more than two, but we can't lose sight of the fact that we have a war in Ukraine that's completely unnecessary, and the poor people of Ukraine what they're going through, which is putting pressures on oil and gas production. And the second thing is we still have a pandemic. As I look out in the crowd, every other person's wearing a mask. We still are living within a pandemic time, and that caused lots of disruption in our society, both physically, mentally, and as well with our goods and services.
Secretary Walsh, before we go to the calls, and we're going to do it in a second, one other issue, actually, the guest right before you, the Attorney General running for governor, when she brought up the issue of student loans, I want to get what she said right. She said, quote, Joe Biden isn't doing nearly enough on student loans. She is where Warren and Presley are saying it should be 50 grand forgiveness. She believes the president does have the power to do it by executive authority, doesn't need congressional approval. Why hasn't President Biden, even on the $10,000 level, acted on this?
I can't answer the question why he hasn't. I haven't been that intimate in the conversations at the White House. I've had several conversations with Senator Warren, with Leader Schumer. I talked to him yesterday about this. We've spoken to the White House a little bit about it. It's really it's not under my jurisdiction, although I do go outside my own jurisdictional line. And I know that there's many conversations happening in the White House about what's the right path forward.
Who's the biggest a-hole you have to deal with in Congress?
I won't comment on that right now.
Okay, let's take a call. Oh, actually, the first caller happens to be a state senator calling in from Methuen. Senator DeZoglio, welcome to the show. How are you?
I am doing very well, Jim and Marjorie. Thanks so much for having me on. It's great to be here. I'm Diana DeZoglio, state senator, also a candidate for state auditor. And I was just calling Mr. Secretary just to say, first and foremost, obviously, as a former colleague of mine in the House of Representatives, I just want to thank you for the work that you're doing as our secretary. And I was with the AFL-CIO folks yesterday at their conference, their Gompers conference down in the Cape, and I was humbled to have received their endorsement. But one of the conversations that we were having was actually about you and the work that you're doing. And I just have a very simple question. Can we expect to see you at the Democratic Convention this year? I know a lot of folks are hoping to get the opportunity to connect with you.
Thank you, Senator. It's great to hear you, and good luck on the race. I served with Diana in the House of Representatives. We served a few years together, and I'm not sure what my schedule is the weekend of the convention. If I'm in town and invited, I will probably go. If I'm not in town, I might be on the road somewhere. I think it's the first weekend of June, so I'm not sure where I'm going to be that weekend. I know I'm going out to in early June. I'm going to Mississippi. I'm doing a Southern Swing, Georgia, a few other places.
Senator, thank you for the call, and we hope to see you here soon. Thanks so much for calling in.
You go to so many states. You talk about going down to West Virginia. You talk about going to Georgia. People hear that you're from Boston. I always wonder what people think. Do they think that you should have horns in your head? Or something?
No. They kind of. First of all, they don't understand anything I say. So I
By the way, we didn't understand everything you said when you were the mayor. It was incredible.
I don't know if I sound like a genius to them or what, but no, it's really amazing to go around the country in different places. First of all, from Boston, we don't get too much into politics. I mean, some people think that we're like so liberal and progressive that, and after they get a chance to talk to me a little bit, they realize that the challenges and the things that we talked about here in Boston are the same that we talk about around the country. It's really amazing going to different places and seeing the different challenges and the different mindsets. I'll give you an example. Minimum wage here in Massachusetts is heading towards $15 an hour. We have a living wage in Boston. And when you go to like places like some parts of Georgia, some parts of Alabama, like people think $15 an hour minimum wage is like this awful thing. It's going to end society. And people are struggling. And you realize that we're fortunate that being from, I'm from here, Julie Sue, my deputy, is from California, and we kind of lead the country in a lot of ways in workers' rights and in wages and benefits and fighting for people. So we try to bring that to other parts of the country, not by forcing it down people's throat, but by working with them. So that's kind of the experiences I've seen there.
They think it's going to end civilization because the small businesses will shut down, or because they?
Yeah, they say it hurts small. The legislators will say it hurts small businesses. And I tell the story, actually, in Boston, when Boston instituted a living wage or a minimum wage, businesses benefited from it. And people got, happier. And now we're seeing, minimum wage is $15 an hour, but a lot of companies, McDonald's and Amazon and all these other companies, they're paying $20, $25, $26 an hour starting salary. And people ask me, is that bad to add to inflation? It's good. Anytime a worker gets an increase in wages, that's a good thing.
How do I assume everybody listening knows you played apparently a pretty significant role in resolving the lockout with Major League Baseball and the Players Association. I mean this sincerely, Mr. Secretary. How suspicious of you are employers? I mean, you don't hide.
That's a great question.
Who you are in terms of your background and what you did.
Yeah, no, I think it's no different than Boston. If anyone remembers when I was running for Boston, running for mayor of Boston, people were saying, and the press was saying, that I'm going to be so pro-labor, I'm going to be terrible for business, the economy's going to go down.
Marjorie said it, by the way.
Yeah,
she did.
I repeatedly,
she did say it.
And I think that when you look back on the time I was mayor, or even during mayor, the business community embraced me and loved the fact the policies were moving. We were regulating and doing things like that, but we're also streamlining processes. And the same is being done in Washington. When I spent a lot of time, well, when I say a lot of time, I spent enough time talking to businesses and companies, and I spent a fair amount of time at the Chamber of Commerce. And my first meeting with the Chamber of Commerce, the United States Chamber of Commerce, I could feel the animosity, if you will, against a labor person who's a labor secretary. If you go back to those folks today, and I spoke at the Chamber, one of their committees the other day, that's gone. And they understand that it's about collaboration. And you can't advocate for workers and workers' rights if you have the other side putting a wall up. And I just feel it's really important to break down those barriers. And I feel like I have a pretty good relationship. But when you go to certain states, obviously, it's a little different. They see me coming in. They're like, oh, he was a labor guy. He was this, that. And then after they talk to me, they realize he's not as bad as we thought.
By the way, a ton of questions on, that's a hell of an endorsement, not as bad as we thought. Well, obviously, a few people agree with that. A bunch of people on text, Mr. Secretary, are curious to know what your thoughts are about the possibility of a recession, what the administration is doing to try to prevent it. What do you worry about in terms of impacts? Is it going to happen?
Well, clearly when I think about recession, I look at it through the lens of my old job, being mayor, and the concerns I would have of going into recession. We've had about 15 years of incredible economic growth in this country. I think that we will. The president is working, the administration is working, Treasurer Yellen's working on making sure that we continue a stable, strong economy moving forward. I think we're going to feel inflationary pressures a lot of this year, and then I think we'll start to see things level back off and get back to, I don't know what normal is anymore at this point, because we've had a 2.5 year period of a pandemic, but I think we'll see a good economy moving forward. The administration is really focused on looking where the shortfalls were during the pandemic. And a lot of the shortfalls were, we talked a little bit about workers and workers looking for better opportunities and more training and more workforce development. The other side of that is we're so dependent as a nation on foreign imports that we need to be more dependent on homegrown imports, meaning the president has an initiative to buy and build in America. One of them is we have the Bipartisan Innovation Act, which would allow us the opportunity to make investments in build these computer chips that we create in America that we don't build here. If we're able to have factories in America that create computer chips, these cars that are on lots now waiting for these computer chips, our phones, our computers, everything we have needs a computer chip. We need to do more of that development here, one of the things. And the second thing is I was in Ohio about 6 months ago where we broke ground on First Solar. It's a solar manufacturing facility that builds solar panels. We need to do more of that building here in America and creating jobs.
Beth from Milford, you are on with Marty Walsh, the Secretary of Labor, former mayor of Boston.
Hi, Beth.
Hi, I appreciate being on the call. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Very excited. Long time, first time, as they say.
Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Secretary Walsh, I'm really excited to speak with you. I currently work in the field of special education and children who have a lot of physical needs. And I'm wondering if you have any connection or ability to, as you're talking about using a living wage, working with MassHealth or Medicaid to raise the rates for personal care attendants, because people have a severe staffing shortage right now and cannot find support help because it only pays $15 an hour, and you can't live on that wage in this state.
No, thank you for that. That falls under Health and Human Services, Secretary Becerra. I absolutely will bring that back to him to talk to him about that. I know that it's completely well, maybe a little related. In the Department of Labor, one thing that we do have is parity, mental health parity, that we're working on. The law was passed about 15 years ago. We truly don't have mental health parity. We need to change that system to make sure we have mental health parity. Part of that is an indirect to special education in some cases. So I will follow up with Secretary Becerra. If you want to stay on the line, and I'll get you a number here, I will make sure that you get a call back from somebody in my office that will hook you in there so you can express directly to the Secretary's office your concerns and what we need to do.
Beth, stay on hold. We'll take your contact information. So if Maura Healey had not run for governor, would you run for governor?
I don't know. You can't look back on
yes,
history.
Yes, you do.
You can't look back on that.
He's not even making eye contact. Can you make eye contact with me when
I'm looking at Marjorie?
That's
would
right.
you run for governor?
Listen, Maura Healey's running for governor, and there's a bunch of other candidates running for governor. So we have a race here in Massachusetts for the first time in 8 years.
Okay, so see if you'll answer this one then. How was the Dunkin' in Korea? We read that you did go to the Dunkin'.
I didn't know Dunkin' Donuts was there.
I didn't either. So we're driving to the American Embassy, and across the street is the.
Why were you there, by the way?
For the inauguration of the new president.
But what does that have to do with what you do for a living?
The president asked us to represent the United States, and then the second gentleman also was there. And I actually
Meaning Kamala Harris's husband?
Yeah, we went together, and then I actually represent the United States of America at the new inauguration of the new president of Cabo Verde as well.
Oh,
wow.
So I've done a couple of trips.
Perks of the job.
I'm sorry, but back to the Dunkin'.
Yeah,
What's the
so
deal?
we're driving down the street. I'm looking at City Hall in Seoul, and I had met the mayor many years ago of Seoul. I was talking about the building, and to the left, across the street, was the American Embassy, and on the corner was a building that was built like in 1652. And I'm like, wow, the history is amazing of Korea. And I look to the left, and there's Dunkin' Donuts. And so we pulled into the American Embassy, and the second gentleman was there, and we were going to do a briefing. And I asked him, would you do the briefing? He said, yeah. I said, I'll be right back. So I walked down the street, and I went into Dunkin' Donuts, and I ordered a medium regular coffee. And it was pretty awesome.
Did it taste
How was
just
it?
the same?
It was
Yeah.
a little different taste, but
Really?
it was still like, it's Dunkin'.
Yeah.
The cup, the lid's different. The lid's more plastic, but it was pretty cool getting a Dunkin' Donuts in Korea.
Every time I talk to Marty Walsh, I think that I should be spending more time with the 12 steps because you seem so calm and you seem so.
As opposed to Marjorie.
Yeah, no, I do. I think I should because a lot of people are hysterical about lots of things right now, as you know.
No, they are.
And one of the things they're really hysterical about is that because Biden's not doing that well in the polls right now, that we're going to have a takeover of Congress in 2022, and that we may even have what the GOP is complaining about now, a truly fraudulent election.
Let me just say this, 12 steps actually helps.
I bet.
And people that are struggling out there, I've said this before on the radio, don't reach out to somebody. If you're struggling right now, reach out to somebody. There's a lot going on. 3 years have been difficult for a lot of people. Don't be afraid to talk about it, number one. Number two, as far as the administration goes, President Biden and Vice President Harris are committed to making sure we continue to move America forward, continue to making sure that we create pathways into the middle class. You have a cabinet made up of people that were four former mayors, a few former governors, people who really care about the issues. The Secretary of HUD is Marcia Fudge. She's a former congressman, former mayor of Cleveland. She's one of us. Just like us. She could stand here and talk just like I am about the issues on the street. Gina Raimondo, former governor of Rhode Island, same thing. Vilsack, former governor of Iowa, plus a mayor. You have Cardona, who is Secretary of Education, who's from Connecticut. There's some beautiful, dedicated people in this administration that are not going to let this country fail. We're going to work hard every day to make sure President Biden and his administration is successful, which ultimately means the American people are successful.
We'll get back to the calls in a minute. We're talking to the Secretary of Labor for the United States of America, Marty Walsh. You touched on a piece of this a minute ago. We're not post-pandemic. Obviously, numbers are rising in terms of cases. Luckily, deaths are not rising, even though there's still too many of them. What are the kinds of special things that as Secretary of Labor you wouldn't have faced 3 years ago? I mean, do you deal, for example, with the fact that hybrid work seems to be the future in this country?
Yeah.
Some places remote work. You also have something, I don't even know what it is, but I read about Good Jobs Initiative.
Yep.
What exactly is pandemic addressing that you and your colleagues are doing?
Well, I think, when the pandemic began, I was in City Hall, and as the pandemic went on, we were thinking about what's the future work going to look like on a very small level, because we're thinking, when's this going to end, and when can we come back in the office, and when are people going to feel safe? And no one had that answer. I get nominated as Secretary of Labor. Now I'm thinking about, and I'm going around the country, I'm talking to businesses and I'm talking to workers, and the future of work, in my opinion, is going to be very different. And I think in some situations, hybrid is going to be the case where it works. In some cases, maybe all hybrid. In some cases, people still need to go into the office. And we're having these conversations and dialogues now with businesses and workers around the country. The Good Jobs Initiative was an initiative that we created in regards to the infrastructure investment bill to make sure that it goes across the government, to make sure that the investments in these initiatives aren't just about building a bridge or putting new pipes in the ground for drinking water or connecting broadband connectivity. It's making sure that people that get a chance to work on those jobs get access to a good paying job, good benefits, potentially health retirements, good working conditions. And we're working now with states as well, and hopefully with cities, to really think about, when you're an employer. Right now, employers are even thinking about, how are we going to retain our workers? The way you do that is by creating good jobs. What does that mean? Good jobs means people are looking, in some cases, for flexibility. They're looking for a wage that they can raise a family on. They're looking for benefits of pension or health care or some type of retirement. That's what people are looking for in this country, because I think the pandemic, the fear that people are feeling is some people are feeling, God, I'm not ready to move on. And 2.4 million people last year left retired 2 years before we thought they were going to. So people are retiring. So the pandemic I think, has allowed us the opportunity. I don't know if it's a benefit of the pandemic, but think about resetting who we are in America.
Let's go to Jill in Medford. You're on with the Secretary of Labor, Marty Walsh. Welcome to the show, Jill.
Thank you. I have an issue. There's special interest groups for all sorts of people, but I think older women have been ignored entirely, and the reason it's a concern is because they earn less to begin with. They live longer. They don't have good pensions because of that. They don't have good Social Security, especially single women. And I don't think anybody recognizes that they're living longer with no money.
That's a
Is there anything to discuss that?
No, that's a big challenge, and that's a challenge, quite honestly, as a country we're going to have to face. I just want to take it one step further. I think that women in this country, in a lot of ways, are overlooked completely. I think that we have an issue with childcare right now. We have more women. The coronavirus impacted more women disproportionately than men, and I think women of color were hit even harder than white women. And I think that when we think about who we are, where we're going as a country, we really have to think about that. So a couple things. One is that we have what's called the Women's Bureau inside the Department of Labor who are working on a lot of these different issues. We're looking at what the future is going to look like for women that might not have benefits. That's going to be a bigger challenge we have. I work very closely with the AARP. Nancy McLeod and the folks at the AARP when I was the mayor, when I was a state rep, and now as Secretary of Labor on a nationwide level. We're having long conversations about this. I think that as the defined benefit pension went away in this country over the last 40 years, I think a lot of people are going to working later in their career and they're struggling to how to move forward. I actually think we have to move back towards a system that maybe it's not the defined benefit, although I like the pension. We have to move back to a system where we're not only working with workers that are currently working, but we're thinking about their future when they retire. That's a big problem, not just for women, but I agree with you. Individual women will be disproportionately hit harder because they live longer, and a lot of women, they don't have the benefits because they were raising their children, they weren't working, and when they are working, they're not paid the same as men, so they've even lost revenue in their salaries.
Can we move, I'm sorry, from older women to younger women for a second? Marjorie and I were on the phone with another Dorchester kid, John King, the other day, saying, why doesn't the president enact the Defense Production Act for this formula nightmare? And when we got off the air, he had done it.
He must have heard you guys.
Well, that's what we
Exactly.
believe,
Good
Mr.
action.
Secretary. But in all seriousness, there's, obviously this is not like a toilet paper shortage. You figure out something. This is a crisis.
Yeah.
What does he do? I mean, that's important. We know the Abbott facility is going to reopen in a few weeks. It's going to be 6 to 8 weeks before they're producing product. What is he doing to assure those young parents that their kids are going to be healthy and fed?
Well, one of the things the president announced yesterday was Operation Fly Formula, which the Defense Production Act allows us the opportunity in that Fly Formula to go to other countries and get their excess formula and bring it back to the United States of America. So we're going to start seeing that coming back into,
That's a very big deal,
into
actually.
America immediately. And clearly, the reason why this factory or factories were shut down is because there was little ones were getting sick from the formula produced, and the FDA has been all over this issue. Certainly the president is making this a priority. It is a national problem. I've certainly heard it a couple times from people saying this is going to be a crisis. And he is, this is one of the, there's a lot of top important issues, but this is right at the top of the list.
So how much do you miss being here? I'm serious. It's pretty clear you do. This is the first time I've actually seen you in person since you were elevated. How do you deal with it? You are a city kid.
Yeah.
How hard is this for you?
I'm into the job now. It took me a long time to get into the job and get the old job out of my system. It's still in the system, obviously. I loved being the mayor of Boston. I love being a state representative. I love talking to people here. I try to replicate that when I'm around the country and I get a chance to talk to a lot of people. The part of the job that I love the most, any role I've had in government, is not necessarily the policy side. It's the talking to people and coming up with solutions and challenges of the street. So I do miss being the mayor. Obviously, there's no secret to that. But also, I also love representing the United States of America in the United States cabinet for the president.
We're running out of time here. I know you too. But one last thing. You said, more important in some ways than the policy. how the hell do you know what you're talking about? I mean, I don't mean this in a condescending way. When you became mayor, you essentially had done a variation on the theme. You dealt with the city and other places when you were the head of the building trades. You obviously dealt with the city, representing it in the State House, and then you become mayor. This is, even though you're a labor guy, you mentioned all the departments to Marjorie before. In all seriousness, how do you get up to speed and are you intimidated by some of the stuff you didn't know before?
Well, I'll tell you, the first 3 months I was intimidated because they use acronyms in the federal government. So they'd be like OSHA, EPSHA, MSHA, and I'm like, I didn't know. I had a sheet, and I'm like, looking at the sheet. What does this mean? What does it do? I think it's just you get into the rhythm of talking to people. I have an incredible team in Washington that prep me and brief me for all this stuff. And then you have to, the one thing that I do miss, I can't dive way into the weeds in this stuff as much as I'd like to. And Dan Cook, my chief of staff, came down with me. My former chief of staff in Boston came down with me, so we work well together. We have another woman, Allison Zellman, who's a deputy chief of staff. So we have some really good people. We have counselors there that work with me. So they constantly give me information, feed me information. And then when you're out on the road, it's repetitive, talking about these issues. Because today on the call, I mean, I got 2 different calls. One woman's worrying about, Medicare, Medicaid, which is not my area, but I know that from the State House. You learn to adapt and learn the issues.
The one thing I forgot to ask you, I'm sorry.
So I'm going to ask him something first, okay?
Go ahead.
Okay. I just want to ask, you're a pretty young guy. This could be over in...
I'm getting older.
Yeah, but in 2024, you love being the mayor of Boston. Jim asked you about being the governor. You said, other people are running for governor. What are you going to do? You thought about it?
I have no idea.
Stay in politics?
I didn't even think about what I was going to do after being mayor. Like, I honestly... thinking about running for governor wasn't like I wasn't thinking. I didn't wake up in the morning and say, okay, I'm going to be a state rep. I'm going to run for mayor. I want to be governor and whatever after that. That wasn't my mindset. My mindset was I wanted to be the mayor of Boston. I focused on being the mayor. I tried to be the best possible mayor I could be of the city. And then this opportunity presented itself. The president called me up after I got vetted, and I don't know what's next. I don't know. I just know whatever I do next, whatever is next, because there will be something next, I hope, it's dealing with people, because I love dealing with people. Like, that's really what gets me excited.
You mean like a job like governor, for example? Is that what you're talking about?
Well, we're going to have a governor, so we're going to have a governor. It might sound crazy. I miss talking to the homeless people in Boston.
Yeah.
I miss going to the schools. I miss talking to people like that. And when I'm in other places, I do the same thing, but it's different. But I'm in a different role, and I try to help in a different way.
Can I just say one thing about that? I'm hesitating for a second because it probably will show a bias on one issue, and I have been with you when you've encountered homeless people as mayor here, and I had heard these stories before, but if people haven't seen this before, beyond the empathy that you show that I think is otherworldly, you offer your damn cell phone number when you're mayor to homeless people to call you anytime if they need. And I have to say, I really that's really something. So
thank you, my friend.
It's really something. Mayor Walsh. Oh, excuse me. You're not Mayor Walsh.
No,
Secretary
it's all right.
Walsh.
The man might get pissed, but it's all right.
Hope you'll come back soon. Secretary Marty Walsh. Let's hear it, please.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mayor Walsh, Secretary Walsh, for coming in. We very much appreciate it.
Great to see you.
Okay, thank you again to the mayor and the secretary. When we get back, GBH Arts and Culture reporter James Bennett II on what he's calling one of the great movies capturing the zeitgeist of the moment, and also this great new music venue in Boston. We're going to talk about that and a lot more with James Bennett II. He's next. You're listening to Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH. We are broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library.
I'm Arun Roth. Coming up on GBH's All Things Considered, Massachusetts saw more COVID deaths than anticipated from the Omicron variant, according to a new report out today from Brigham and Women's Hospital. An Everett city official is facing new calls to resign amid allegations of racism. And temperatures could hit 100 degrees this weekend, just in time for college commencements. Those stories and all the day's news starting at 4 on GBH's All Things Considered.
Support for our programs comes from you And Johnson & Wales University, helping to prepare graduates for impactful careers using a collaborative, interdisciplinary approach to learning. You can explore more at jwu.edu. And Oak Meadow School in Littleton, where students can dive deeper in their education, collaborate with peers, and strive for high academic results. Elementary and middle school open house this Sunday. oakmeadow.org/open house.
Back to Boston Public Radio. We are live at the Boston Public Library. I'm Jim Browdy. She is Marjorie Egan. We're also streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. And we're now joined, I think for the first time, yes? First time, yes.
Yeah.
By GBH's Arts and Culture reporter, James Bennett II, here to talk about his love for the new movie, Everything Everywhere All at Once, what he learned about live music, standing in a crowd of teenage fangirls at an Olivia Rodrigo concert, and a whole lot more. It's great to have you here, James. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, y'all. I appreciate it.
I know. I just told him we've been trying to get him ever since I saw him on your TV show.
Yes,
this guy
we have.
can really talk. We need to get him on the radio because you need people that can talk on the radio, right, James? And you are one.
Right on.
Yeah, absolutely. So tell us what's so great about this Everything Everywhere All at Once.
You know, I think what I really appreciated about that movie was the, mundanity of it all. You know, it's about a woman who runs, a laundry service. And so when I went into it, I was just kind of like, oh, the log line or whatever, is she runs this laundry service, taxes are due. Fine. But it's not, no one would ever say that's what the movie is about. It's a movie that's about nothing. And not in a Seinfeld way, but it's about how, nothing really matters. It's not exactly what I would call a nihilistic movie, but it really kind of leans into this idea of philosophical absurdism, which is that once you realize that nothing matters, it's really incumbent on every individual to find something that brings them joy, to imbue meaning, right, with everything that goes on in their own life. And I think there's a line in the movie where it's like, nothing matters. That's fine. But because nothing matters, anything can matter. So
that's pretty big. Here's a little sound, by the way, from that movie, Everything Everywhere All at Once, with the heroine, that's who James is talking about. Evelyn's husband recruits her to save the multiverse.
I'm not your husband. I'm another version of him from another universe. I'm here because we need your help.
Very busy today. No time to help you.
Across the multiverse, I've seen thousands of Evelyns. You can access all of their memories, their emotions, even their skills. There's a great evil spreading throughout the many verses. And you may be our only chance of stopping it.
So there is obviously a sci-fi element to this deal, yes?
Right, and I guess you could call it a sci-fi movie because of that, but it's not as straightforward, there's a threat to the city, let's all team up and take it out. This is not a knock on the Avengers, but it's certainly not that. It really leans into this, idea of the multiverse. That is, there are infinite parallel universes that are out there that, I guess in some iteration we exist in. And the central conflict here is the multiverse as it exists. So everything, everything in the title is under threat. And so she's tapped in to basically be the savior of humanity in every iteration that humanity possibly exists.
Well, but if nothing matters, why are we wasting our time with this discussion? I mean, that to me is really the ultimate. Do you understand, Marjorie, or no?
Well, I like the way you put it in the piece you wrote. You're talking about the themes of the 2020s, right? Weight of personal decisions, family conflict, generational trauma, and of course the inherent meaninglessness of life, which is always, it's philosophical, right?
Yeah, I mean, so the Daniels, that's the team, Daniel Scheinert and Daniel Kwan, they wrote this movie during the Trump administration. If they came out then, I'm sure we could find some parallels to graft meaning onto it from that lens. But it came out in 2022, 3 years into a global pandemic. And what I think is really cool is that, we were already, before we even knew this movie existed, we were already thinking about what if our lives were different? What if we did not stay home on March, 8th or whatever, 2020? We're thinking about how much of what we're actually doing matters. People are, that are able to work from home, are taking a step back and thinking to themselves, is it really necessary to do all of this extra work, to have all this extra weight? And even people that aren't working from home, people that are, on those front lines, people, that are working in the healthcare industry, there are a lot of platitudes that were kind of served up to them in this very smoke and mirrors way. so much stuff was lifted when this pandemic, first came on. Remember, like the economy was like the stock market, right? Like fell by however many points. It was like what? This is all fake.
Yeah. And we need someone to rescue us. I think that's the other thing,
right.
too. We need someone to rescue us. So tell us about this really neat new music venue, the Roadrunner, which
right down the street
right
from our
near our
studio
station.
in Bright,
Yeah, we can
Guest
just kind of
Street.
segue right down there.
Yeah, so it is a venue that was originally proposed, I believe, to be a practice facility for the Boston Celtics. Congrats on the win last night.
I know.
Yeah, right.
Crushed them. Crushed them.
There she goes.
It was designed for that purpose. The Celtics passed on it for whatever reason, and it was Bowery Presents, the music promotional business. They came in, they bought it, turned it into music space to fill this gap that they perceived between small club, large venue. So I think the capacity is like 3,000, maybe 5.
That's
Yeah.
huge.
Yeah, it is certainly not small.
Right.
The one takeaway that I think I like about it is that there are very few right angles. There's not a lot of perpendicularism in the building, and so because everything is a bit fanned out on each level, there's a very good sight line to the actual stage.
Is it all standing room? Are there seats? No seats.
You can make a seat if you want.
What does that mean?
It means that, there are like these stairs that you can stand on. Like they're poured concrete, levels. But nothing's stopping you from standing on it if you really want to. And then there's accessibility seating on the mezzanine.
I like Olivia Rodrigo's music. I thought her performance at the Grammys recently was really disappointing. How was she at Roadrunner?
It was one of the more. It was like the most fun I've had at a show, as far as like the energy that you can consume from being like in a room with people that like are so into her. Like I like her music a lot, right? Like I love that album. Sour is great. I should go pick up a copy of it from a store when I leave here. But it was. I've been to so many shows at Roadrunner, and this was the first time I went where the average age had to have been like 16. It was deafening. I was trying to interview some people back in the bar area before the show went on. There were like 5 people in the bar area for very obvious reasons. 2 people that worked at the venue, 1 parent, and a pair of sisters. So, and I already knew when she was going to come on because just the piercing sound from inside of the venue proper just reached my ears. I was like, all right, it's time to go in. I was talking to my mother about this. This is a very, very loose comparison, I will say, couching my words here. I was not alive when the Beatles played Shea Stadium in 64. 64, yeah.
I was.
Got that right. I did not go. I imagine, though, that the excitement and energy of being in that place then is akin to like what I felt that night. I don't have a control here, but that's just kind of that was like my first thought, really. I talked to so many kids, first concert ever, so many birthday presents. I can only imagine what it would be like to have a young fan wake up, here are 2 tickets, me and, your guardian or whatever, taking you to see your favorite pop star.
I want you to know that thousands of listeners just called it EMT because of that comparison you made. We're talking to James Bennett II. You wrote about Dane Cook. Dane Cook is a comedian from Arlington. I interviewed him years ago for a magazine called Boston Common. And
it's a brilliant piece, Jim.
Thank you. I have to admit, I don't know if I'd ever even heard of him before. And when I started researching him, I found out he only had the biggest comedy albums, like in the history of comedy. He was just passing Steve Martin or somebody. And then all of a sudden, and I cannot tell a lie, I never fell in love with his work, but I knew enough to know how huge he was. And then all of a sudden, he totally disappeared, and he's reappeared. You write about why did he disappear and how did the reappearance come about?
Yeah, so he didn't So here's the thing. I didn't interview him, actually. I couldn't, I reached out several times, couldn't get him. But that means that
because he was so angry at me for the old interview.
That's right. See, thank you for that.
That's okay.
Made my job harder.
Thank you.
The thing about Dane Cook, I'm not bringing any kind of fandom into this. This is as objective as I can get, I hope. The style of comedy that he presented is like, that scene in Jurassic Park where they have the mosquito and the amber and like the blood is in the, and they extract the DNA?
Yeah.
Watching Dane Cook's specials in 2022 feels like that. It's of the moment of the mid to like late 2000s. It's, this kind of style of comedy that I think falls in line with episodes of Family Guy from that era, from, Tucker Max and his book in Blood, Hope, Serve Beer in Hell, where Dane Cook hates the designation of being like the frat comic, but that, to me, when I was in high school, when those specials were coming out, that to me was what his fan base was. I don't think Dane Cook really, in his comedy, was saying anything too out of pocket, especially considering when he was releasing these albums.
Yeah.
But what his comedy, like the audience that it spoke to, I think was a bit of like an awkward, dance. It's like, what do you like behind a closed door? I don't know. So, yeah.
You know what I wondered, though, reading your piece, and I know very little about comedy, but I was just thinking of the people, some of the people you mentioned, Richard Pryor, George Carlin, Robin Williams, Eddie Murphy, Chris Rock, Adam Sandler. Who does last? I mean, I think it's one thing to be a comedian at 22. It's got to be. It's hard to be a comedian at 52. Right?
Yeah. So Dane Cook actually was interviewed in the Globe. I want to say it was last month, and he actually spoke to this whole thing. And the gist of what he was saying is that, he likes this polarizing thing that he has about his comedy being funny or not. Because in his opinion, the only way to really remain relevant is to have people that are railing against you in some way.
Yeah.
I mean, we're talking about him right now. I wouldn't call him like wholly irrelevant at all. I mean, I saw his show. There were, people there that I would say like maybe in the like late 30s, early 40s, age range. But I was also sitting next to a pair of who looked to me, like college students,
Really?
who were like cracking up the entire time. And my big regret was that I didn't actually get to ask them, like, what is the appeal to this dude who was so popular, probably like, when you were like in third grade?
Yeah.
What's keeping you hanging on? And I think like what Dane Cook is trying to do, and this is also what he mentioned in the interview, is like he's trying to be a bit more vulnerable, a bit more open. I'm not saying that this was a comedy, set where he was sitting on a stool and, kind of being morose. But he did open up in a way and let his comedy shift to reflect who he was now, being someone in like a very serious relationship, someone who was dealing with like fame, but not. He made a great joke about chilling in his mansion, which got a really good laugh, and then followed up with the whole thing about how Chuck and Larry did very, very well.
Yeah.
Critically, it did not, famously. So, he's sticking around. I don't know what the magic formula is. I'm not a comedian.
Who has, though? I'm trying to think. I mean, a lot of people seem to have
Dave Chappelle,
lasted,
until he
right?
had some pretty
Dave
serious
Chappelle.
recent issues.
Yeah, Chris Rock has been around for a long time.
Well, Steve Martin.
Steve Martin was around forever.
So,
George Carlin was around forever, too, wasn't he?
He's sort of dead, though.
Well, he's dead now, Jim.
So,
Yes, he is. There was just a big piece about him, though.
I know, I
full
saw it.
page of George Carlin, New York Times.
But, when you mentioned that he was talking about his relationship and the thing, is this the relationship with the kid who could have been at the Olivia Rodrigo concert? I mean, she's young. Am I not right about this?
She is young.
Yeah.
She is like, I don't know, like early 20s.
Okay.
That is a statement of fact.
She loves Olivia Rodrigo.
I will say,
I'm sorry, what?
I will say
Yes.
that in the show, he starts talking about, well, in the stuff that I saw, he does start talking about relationships and what it's like being a boyfriend. And someone, I guess, is a heckler. I couldn't tell if it was a heckler or a Confederate. I was very intrigued by this. Screamed out, but you're like something along the lines of like, but you're dating like a kid, right?
Yeah.
What do you say to that?
Well, he just kind of leaned into it. He was like, I'm an adult, she's an adult, I'm actually happy and I'm in love, yada, yada, yada.
Isn't this what
goes on.
all
So
rich men do? Don't they? All rich men that are like billionaires marry people 20 and 30 and 40 years younger than they do? I think that's
Not when they're young
fairly
20s,
common.
Marjorie.
Yeah.
I have age differentials I'm totally fine with. 22
I don't know,
or something.
Jim. I think you're not
okay,
looking close
fine.
enough.
We talked last week or whenever it was. We had Jared Bowen here. We were talking about the Frederick Law Olmstead bicentennial. But in a related thing, which I had not heard about in terms of commemoration of history, can you describe to us this Rights Along the Shore thing that, again, as I say, I did not know about, but obviously has great relevance here in Boston?
Yeah, absolutely. So Rights Along the Shore is being packaged into this whole, Olmstead celebration. So I went down to check it out, and you walk in, and you're greeted with this meditation, I guess. I mean, it's a gallery, so a lot of still stuff, but there is a video installation I'll get to in a second. You're greeted with this idea about like the shared community of water, and there is at the centerpiece of this a film, like an art film that discusses the desegregation of public pools and public water areas in Carson Beach in Alexandria, not Arlington, Alexandria, Virginia, and New Orleans. So I'm sitting there and I'm watching these people, talk about their, personal experiences in these spaces, or people that were descended from these folks, But I was like, what does this have to do at all with Frederick Olmstead? I was like, did he design Carson Beach in some way? He did not. So I wound up talking to one of the executives at the gallery, and she explained to me that it's more about the ethos of Frederick Law Olmsted's kind of call to action, that we should respect the environment as a common. And, waterways are that. This Carson Beach thing, 1975, it's heavily segregated, and, black residents in the neighborhood organized a wait-in, right, and a picnic and a day at the beach. And you see these images of, police, mounted police, charging into the... It's I would say it's surreal, but, I mean, it's really not, because look where we, live in this country. It's really sad. It's not surreal. It's not weird. It's a fact. But, yeah.
So I saw this walk guy on TV, and I thought...
Walk guy.
He's great. He's famous and he's great, but should we play a little sound of why we should all go out and buy walks and what kind of walks we should all go out and buy? And you can tell us about him. Here's Ken J. Lopez Alt in a Wired video talking about how to make the best of stir fry, starting with the wok.
I'm using a carbon steel wok. Carbon steel is what I recommend people use at home. Carbon steel gets this layer of what's called black oxide when you heat it up, so that's what makes the steel all black. That black oxide not only aids in sort of giving it non-stick properties, but more importantly, it actually transfers flavor to your food. So if you were to cook a stir fry in a carbon steel seasoned wok like this versus a stainless steel wok and feed them to people side by side, the difference in flavor is really immediate and obvious.
So obviously we should all go out and get woks now, because after watching him, I mean, it's unbelievable.
They're cheap.
Absolutely.
Yeah, they are cheap. You're supposed to get one steel one, though, not with the coating on the
Carbon
inside.
steel, yep.
So he's a big star?
Yeah, I like his work a lot. I own both of his cookbooks,
Yeah.
and he's someone that really dives into the science, right, of why you're doing things that you do in the kitchen. His thing about the wok is that it's just an incredibly versatile instrument in this culinary landscape. He's telling me you can deep fry in it, you can pan fry in it, you can steam in it. Stir fries are great with those sloped sides. And it has just such a rich history.
Are you good at this? You good at the wok thing?
I've gotten pretty decent at it. I will say. I don't know if
you ask Marjorie if she's good at it. Go ahead.
I don't have a wok. I don't have a wok. I can't cook
Exactly.
anything. I make good tuna fish.
Yeah.
But it looks. He's such a. I don't know. He's just fun to watch. Like a lot of these cooking guys.
Well, here's what I'll say. He told me about the food social media, the food YouTuber, the food Instagram and TikTok kind of landscape, and there is a curation that comes with putting your food and the cooking process into that tight space. 2 minutes, you really can't get a feel for what's actually going on, as opposed to someone like Jack Pepin or Julia Child, where they're working in real time without these doubles or whatever. And he tries to do that on his own channel, where he's just kind of here's what I'm going to make for lunch today. He has an overhead camera usually, so you can follow him around the kitchen. And his whole ethos is that, I'm a professional chef. I mess up sometimes. That is totally okay. It's still going to be delicious. So, have fun in the kitchen, pay attention to your technique, and don't sweat the technique, I guess.
Okay.
So but we're unfortunately out of time, but James, let me give you a little advice. Next time you're alone with Marjorie back at Brighton or whatever, speaking of Jacques Pepin, ask her about a fundraiser.
Oh, come on.
Excuse me.
You
We
told the
went to
story
a
a million
fundraiser
times.
for the Culinary program at
Yeah,
BU.
right.
And ask her about her evening with Jacques Pepin.
Well, I was between Jacques Pepin and his sidekick there, right?
Yes,
and,
sidekick.
And you talk about Dane Cook with his 20-year-old. Well, they're that's what you're going to talk about, right?
No,
That
I
they're
was
in the-
not. I was going to say you bonded the two of you.
That's right. Well,
one great cook and you.
Because I'm a lot younger than they are.
That
Dane
wasn't my
Cook's
point at
girlfriends.
all.
What was your point?
I don't know. I guess when you and James
Okay.
talk, he'll figure it out.
I like Jacques Pepin a lot. He's a very
He's
elegant
fabulous.
French gentleman.
Fabulous
But
guy.
anyway, James Bennett, thank
Were you
you.
going to say something?
Yeah, I was going to say, to cover my own self,
Please.
I will say that maybe they met when she was 20, whatever, but the age difference is still big. So, don't.
Beautifully
listen,
put.
I just had
Thank
to.
you.
But
Trust
still,
me,
it's
you
quite a
weren't
gap.
there. Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay.
James
okay.
Bennett, it's great to see you. Thanks so much for joining us. We
Yeah,
appreciate
thank you
it.
very, very much.
Thank you.
James Bennett is an arts and culture reporter here for GBH News. We're very thrilled to have him. Up next, Sue O'Connell joins us to talk about how the anti-abortion Republican Party is also apparently against spending money on ending the baby formula shortage for babies that are already here. Plus, this animal rights group looking for free this Bronx Zoo elephant by making the case for the elephants. Personhood. That and more is next on Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH, broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library.
Trusted, local news. This is 89.7 WGBH, WGBH HD1 Boston, online at gbhnews.org. Boston's local NPR.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy, Marjorie Egan, live at the Boston Public Library and streaming on youtube.com/GBH News. Stick around, by the way, in about 15 minutes, the Kendall Square Orchestra is going to be playing for us ahead of a concert a few days from now, Symphony For Science, benefiting young girls interested in science. It's a great project. They're a great orchestra. But first, speaking of great, here to take on the social norms and abnormalities of the day, of course, is media maven Sue O'Connell. Sue is the co-publisher of Bay Windows and South End News and contributor to Current on NBCLX and NBC. She was just waving to people I assume are her cousins. Is that correct?
No, my former employers are here. Barry Morris from the Boston Phoenix.
Oh, my God. They're not your
Adam Klein.
cousins?
Not my cousins. I was on the payroll, though.
You
so
were.
it's
That's
kind of
close
the same,
enough.
yes.
It's incredible. Sue always brings people with her,
Yeah,
which
she
is
does.
one of the things we
She does.
really
It's very
appreciate.
good.
Thank you.
So Sue O'Connell, let's talk about Tucker Carlson, who is a big star on Fox News. He's taken a lot of heat this week as he talks endlessly on a show about the racist replacement theory, which is in these documents that a lot of these people that wind up committing terrible crimes talk about in their things too. Have we got some piece?
We have a little sound. Well, the
on
thing
this?
we want to talk to you about is one of his main targets.
Yes.
Is Hunter Biden, and here is Tucker Carlson last October on the one of many times he was trashing Hunter Biden. In this case, trashing his art career.
So again, let's say you were a crackhead through your 40s, made a lot of pornographic videos, mostly of yourself, your genitals covered in M&Ms, and then once you got to your 50s, decide, hey, I want to be Andy Warhol, I'm a highly paid pop artist. You probably couldn't do it unless your dad happened to be the president, and that's how Hunter Biden pulled that off.
Okay, now he said these pretty nasty things about Hunter Biden, but now we find out that he involved Hunter Biden in what, please?
Yeah, well, first of all, the way to get to the ICA is to cover your body in M&Ms. And
Your genitals in
your
particular.
genitals, and then that's basically...
Who hasn't done that, by the way?
How Andy Warhol got to be
Exactly.
so famous. But the big story here is that Tucker Carlson and his wife basically were friends with Hunter Biden and asked Hunter Biden to have one of those interview meetings with their son, because he could be so helpful while he was getting out of college or getting into college.
Getting into Georgetown. He was hoping to get him into Georgetown.
And talked about how great their relationship was. So, the thing that disgusts me on a deep, deep level with a lot of these clowns is that they pretend to be something that they're not.
I couldn't agree more.
I'm no fan of Hunter Biden's. I don't really think you have to love or hate Hunter Biden for this, but to ask someone for a personal favor and then trash them on the air in order to get ratings. It's one thing if he changed his mind about Hunter Biden, but I don't think he did. I think Hunter Biden has been who Hunter Biden is for many, many years, and that Tucker Carlson and his wife don't think there's a problem at all for asking Hunter Biden for a favor for their son and talking about what great friends they are and then turning around and trashing Hunter Biden for ratings.
And by the way, Biden did the favor
Yep.
for the Carlsons, and then Tucker Carlson's wife, on both of their behalfs, wrote a fawning email, I believe it was, or note, saying how much they admired Hunter Biden and wanted to thank him. I'm with you, by the way. I can tolerate sick positions. I don't have to like them.
Yeah, if they
but the
mean it.
hypocrisy
Right.
and the fraud. We have worked with a lot of right-wing people, Marjorie and I, in our careers, such as they are in the media. Would you not say that many of them, their right-wing-ism was manufactured for how they best felt it would fit with the audience?
Yeah, there's nothing worse than thinking you're going in to have a debate about an issue where they're on a more conservative side and you're on a progressive side, and on the break they're saying, okay, next we're going to say this, right? And it's just showbiz to them, and that's the part that's repulsive.
So the Republican Party has turned into the forced birth party, clearly all across America. But once we have the babies born, they're not really that keen on helping them out. What do they do about this formula crisis?
Yeah, so, I feel compelled to say that the Biden administration had an opportunity to take a lesson from the Trump administration and enact the Defense Production Act more quickly than they did, which they should have, and drop the onerous restrictions on formula from Europe, especially. I know many people who imported illegally and feed their kids, and they're okay.
Right.
Having said that,
Marty Walsh, by the way, we knew about the Defense Production Act finally happening. Marty Walsh looked at his phone when he was with us a while ago and said that just yesterday, I agree, it should have been done earlier, he ended that prohibition on importation of healthy formula.
Yeah. So having said that, the opportunity to put your money where your mouth is, or where the baby's the babies who are actually alive and on the planet, the Republicans voted against this formula bill put forward to them just moments after basically talking about how a fetus is a person and a fetus has a right to live. And it is, I don't know how I'm going to get through the next couple of months or next year or so, listening to these anti-abortion activists who talk about how they are caring for women who, may be the victims of rape or may be in circumstances where they can't have a healthy family or raise a child in the way that they want to, talking about the way they're supporting these women individually. And it's total BS. They might help one, but there are thousands of them that aren't.
The governor of Mississippi is going on and on and on about how wonderful it is we're going to be anti-abortion, and already 1 in 3 kids in his state live in poverty. What do you think is going to happen if women that are poor, who are the it just
Could one of you
makes my
explain to
blood
me
boil.
what was the rationale? I have to say, I read about this. I'm not clear. The 192 Republicans who voted against this bill, what was the motivation? That it's
I think
good
they didn't
for
want to give
people?
more. They didn't want to give more money to the Food and Drug Administration.
Yeah, it was.
Why? Because they're going to give it to undocumented people on the border, like that caller mentioned. Which, by the way, under statute, they are required to do, and as a humanitarian thing, they should do.
Women in custody at the border are not able to go to CVS, so we'd like to, even if they could get formula at CVS.
But was that part of the motivation?
No, I don't
No,
think so.
it's just about giving money to the FDA to do more inspections.
And as we know, the FDA is doing such a lousy job inspecting food that we've talked about baby food that has heavy metals and lead in it.
Yeah, the FDA is doing a terrible job.
They're doing a horrible job.
And the fact that our lawmakers didn't realize in November and December, when one of the 3 major producers of infant formula were going to be taken offline, that this wasn't going to happen now. I mean, I only own a couple of small businesses, but I can figure out supply and demand. That's a problem. But these Republicans
The monopoly
continue to say one thing and do another.
You know, Sue, every time I see you, I have in the back of my head, there's a question I want to ask you, and my
All these
memory
years?
is so, not really all these years. And I finally remembered the question, and I'm so glad I remember why you're here. Is an elephant a person? I mean, that's a question that I figured you were probably better equipped to answer
This
than
is
almost
right in my
anybody I
wheelhouse.
know.
Yeah.
So take it
there's
away, will you?
there's an elephant.
Take all the time
Happy,
you need.
Thank you. Happy the elephant. This is he's in New York
Bronx Zoo.
at the Bronx Zoo, and there is a
Which is a
group
nice zoo, if
that
you like
is
zoos.
Nice zoo,
filing a suit that Happy is a person.
Yeah.
Happy is a
Person.
can look in the mirror and recognize himself, which most elephants can actually do, and that Happy should not be in the Bronx Zoo. Happy should be on a reserve because
agree with
Happy
that.
has personhood.
I agree with that.
I would agree with that as well, but the problem with this slippery slope
What's
of
the problem?
personhood is that if we decide that elephants are persons, and then an elephant tramples, a farm in Thailand, does the elephant have to go to court and make,
Yes. Yes,
pay
it
back
does.
the
That's
farmer's
right.
issues? I mean,
In
elephants,
shackles.
in many places, elephants are pests in some ways. We love them all, but they do trample
They are.
things. Yeah, so the issue is here, do we want Happy to, and zoos are complicated issues. I don't come down one way or the other on the zoo issue. I know some people hate zoos, some people love zoos. It's a complicated issue, but I think we have to be careful designating Happy as a personhood, because then we're going to have to hold other elephants accountable
Didn't
for things.
we interview
We
years
interviewed,
ago
yes, we
the
did.
lawyer
Yeah.
who
Stephen
also did
Wise.
the chimpanzee
Yeah.
thing a few years ago?
Yep. So Sue.
Wait, we done with that? That's
well,
it?
Well, I was hoping to move on to People Magazine.
Well, before
which
you
I
move,
really
I know that's really
appreciate.
important to you, but who would be against, except the zoo itself, having an elephant in a sanctuary as opposed to having an elephant in a cage or a zoo? I mean, really?
Well, it's a complicated issue.
It is?
I actually just interviewed someone who had a podcast about the pros and cons of zoos, and it's very,
That's
very
sad.
complicated,
Really?
especially the zoos that are regulated and are, above board and aren't these roadside things, which are a whole nother issue. And it's also a big attraction. If you want to have the money to take care of the animals who are endangered, you got to have the bigger animals to come in.
How hard is it to get someone who does an elephant podcast on your show?
It's not hard at
Not
all.
that
I'm
hard?
pretty desperate,
Yeah, I
so I'll
figure.
speak to just
We
about
should
anyone.
not be selling ivory.
We should not, but then
not
you
be
have like the
selling ivory.
rhinoceroses who don't have their things because
Yep.
humans.
That, by the way,
you know what?
is
Humans
disgusting.
Humans should
Is-
not be people.
Yeah.
I'm going to go the
That's
other.
a great.
Humans,
Make elephants people
make
and make
elephants
people not
humans
people.
not people. That
Excellent.
solves the
I
problem.
love that.
So I haven't had a subscription to People Magazine for quite some
Well,
time.
you're the
That
problem,
that doesn't,
Marjorie.
I know.
It's
That
your
doesn't mean I'm
fault.
not upset about it. I do get their emails because first of all, people always ridiculed People Magazine for all their celebrity stuff. But I remember years ago covering trials, like big trials, like the O.J. Simpson trial, where People Magazine did a better job than a lot of the major newspapers.
You were there, we should say.
I was
though.
there. Yeah, they had some very good reporters there. Plus, they had the sexiest man alive every year. Plus,
Still
they have
do.
all the great celebrity gossip stuff. So I'm kind of sad that even People Magazine is succumbing to the internet, basically.
Yeah, so this is a nuanced story because it was reported in the New York Post, and it feels to me of staff revolt that was planted in
Yeah.
the New York Post. They have a new person in charge, and
At People.
at People Magazine, and they don't think that she knows what she's doing because she didn't know who Tatum was.
That's exactly.
And she
Who
put,
is he?
He's a very hunky movie star
Okay,
that we
fine.
would care about on the
Fine,
cover of
sorry,
People
thank you.
Magazine.
Could have been one of the sexiest men alive. Jim.
They didn't cover the Will Smith slap. They had the
They
daughter.
didn't?
They didn't have him on the cover. The challenge here is that paper prices are going up again, mostly due to the supply chain. And when paper prices go up, it costs more to print things, right? So People Magazine cut a lot of their free subscriptions and subscriptions that they were sending at a discount so they could cover the cost. So their subscription rates numbers have come down. So that means that their advertisers are going to pay less because they're not reaching all these people. At the same time, they have this new editor in. Like every other publication, like Entertainment Weekly,
I
you
know.
know, they are moving online. But for many publications still, most of their revenue comes from the print magazine. So until they get to a point, because it's not cheaper to do things online, it's just different expenses. So they may get to a point where their audience is dying off, no offense, and that people will go online to get People Magazine instead of getting it delivered or see it in their doctor's office.
Is there any truth to the rumor? I didn't have time to confirm this morning. They're not only not going to do a print publication, they're thinking of changing the name of the magazine from People to Elephant. Is that
Okay,
true?
yes, because
Is
we're
there any truth to truth to
people.
that.
We're just going to outlaw
There
people
is truth to
everywhere,
that.
and then we don't have to worry
Why
about
did you
that.
say it's not cheaper? I don't understand. Why is it
Well, it's
not
not
cheaper to go
because,
online?
well,
Don't
one
get
of the
the
things, if you
money.
have a newspaper or a magazine, right, and in the olden days, you would see it on the newsstands, you would see it out, that's free advertising for you. If you have a website, people have to go find it, or
Oh,
you
you
have
mean
to
the
pay-
bottom line
The
kinda-
bottom line is
okay.
not cheaper. You may not have
We
to
don't have as
pay
many
for
ads and stuff,
delivery,
okay.
yeah, and the cost per thousand to reach an online person versus a print person is much lower. So you're seeing, they can tell when you see an ad on the web. They can't tell you when you see it in the newspaper. That's why we can charge more. Don't tell anyone.
We don't have much time left, but I did want to get into one more very upsetting story. We talked about the Don't Say Gay bill and the legislatures around the country that are going after transgender gay people, etc. This story about this wonderful teacher in Miami was really a very sad story. Tell us.
Yeah, there's a teacher, Nicolette Solomon, who is a lesbian, who's married to a woman, and she's concerned that she is not going to be able to continue to teach in Florida as the so-called Don't Say Gay bill is now a law, right? And that means that anyone from kindergarten to third grade, teachers are not allowed to reference sexual orientation or gender expression in any way. Now, I know that we all say, well, why would a gay teacher want to shove their sexuality down someone's throat when they're a kid? What was the name of your second grade teacher?
Miss Foley.
Miss Foley? What
Yeah.
was the name of your second grade
Miss
teacher?
Foley.
So they were single, so you know that they were heterosexuals who were
person, yeah.
single, right? So
She missed that, obviously. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
every single day, children are immersed in heterosexuality. They know whether their teacher's married or not. They are given visual images of straight couples. They are told fairy tales that have been sanitized that used to be about terrible things that happened to princesses, but we're trying to clean it up a little bit. And this teacher's concerned that if a kid asks her about her weekend and she happens to mention her wife, which would be a normal thing for a teacher to do, that she's going to get fired or she's going to get sued. So what you're seeing is a brain drain from Florida and other places of LGBTQ teachers who don't want to talk about their personal life, but they don't want to be sued for it.
And also don't want to not answer a question of a
Right.
student, and kids are really curious
She's
that
quit her
age.
job. She's quit her
Yes,
job,
yes.
and she quit her job because of this. Because she didn't really talk about her life. She hid it because there was so much prejudice from other teachers that she worked with that wouldn't sit next to her, wouldn't talk
Right.
to her, told her she was doing things against God's rules, and on and on.
Yeah,
and on
it's
and
hard
on and on.
enough to be gay
And she
teaching
got
in
all these
Florida.
beautiful letters from the kids talking about how they loved her, how they'd helped her. I mean, she was a wonderful teacher, and now
She's done.
she's done.
You know, by the way, the reason I'm so glad you had time for this, and we are out of time, is that people should, this is in the Washington Post, and the reason I thought this story was so important, because it is as powerful as both of you said, only speaking for myself, I mean, I could explain the Don't Say Gay legislation. I could try to explain fairly well what the potential impact on kids is. The collateral damage, people like this woman, and I'm sure there are thousands of Solomons in this case, is colossal, and the Post deserves a lot of credit for focusing on what that kind of collateral damage is on.
Yeah, the last thing you want to do is go viral because you mentioned your same-sex legal partner by accident talking about what you did, or have a picture of your spouse on your desk. I mean, everything, everyday, day-to-day things that heterosexual couples do without thinking twice about is suddenly, cause for being fired or sued in Florida and in other states.
I just want to say before we go, I want to thank all of the people who are really her cousins, who are pretending they worked for the Phoenix. We really appreciate that.
Don't forget Karen.
Karen in the back
from
is
Revere.
related to you
Look
in
at-
some
see,
fashion or whatever. Sue, it's great to see you.
Thank
Take care.
you.
Sue O'Connell.
Thank you very much. Sue O'Connell is co-publisher of Bay Windows and the South End News and contributor to Current on NBC, LX, and NECN, and of course, our Boston Public Radio media maven. Coming up, Live Music Fridays continue here at the Boston Public Library with musicians from the Kendall Square Orchestra. They are going to entertain us next. You are listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH.
I'm Arun Roth. Coming up on GBH's All Things Considered, Massachusetts saw more COVID deaths than anticipated from the Omicron variant, according to a new report out today from Brigham and Women's Hospital. An Everett city official is facing new calls to resign amid allegations of racism. And temperatures could hit 100 degrees this weekend, just in time for college commencements. Those stories and all the day's news starting at 4 on GBH's All Things Considered.
Funding for our programs comes from you and the Boston Speakers Series, returning to Symphony Hall for 7 evenings, featuring former CIA Director John Brennan, author Eric Larson, and 2021 Nobel Peace Prize winner Maria Ressa. bostonspeakers.org. And Picasso, real estate co-ownership that helps people buy and own a second home. Picasso brings buyers together to co-own a property in an LLC, then provides ongoing management. Listings at pacaso.com.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browning, Marjorie Egan, broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library. We're streaming online at youtube.com/GBH News. Marjorie, I love having the Attorney General here. I love having the Secretary of Labor here. James Bennett was great. Sue was great. There is nothing I like more on a Friday at the library than live music, and you're about to have it. In 2018, Elena Spencer was musing with a work friend about how nice it would be to have an outlet outside of work to meet up and engage in their secondary passion, music. The resulting quartet called themselves the Kendall Square Orchestra, and within a year they'd find themselves playing Symphony Hall with a little-known musician who was with us yesterday, the day before, Keith Lockhart, accompanying them on piano. Now there are more than 70 musicians across 50 biomedical companies in the Kendall Square area. They're hosting their annual Symphony For Science on Monday at Symphony Hall to raise money for the Science Club for Girls with music and speakers, including a Nobel Prize winner. Co-founder, president, and CEO Elena Spencer joins us live, as does Cristo Condacci, whose career I'm pretty much responsible for. He's their music director. I'll explain to you soon. And in a couple minutes, we'll hear some music from some members of their terrific orchestra. Cristo, Elena, it's great to see you both. Thanks for being here.
So this is an incredible story, Elaine. Let's start with you. I mean, a lot of people may muse. They may have played an instrument when they were young, or they kept it up in their 20s. Wouldn't it be nice to have like a second outlet? But they don't go from that to Symphony Hall in like a matter of months. So elaborate on what Jim just said. How did this happen?
Yeah, so like you said, in 2018, myself and my friend Kelly Clark, we were thinking, wouldn't it be great if we could get some people together for music outside of work? And really it was driven by the ecosystem of Kendall Square, where we really co-located all those companies with the idea that that would spark innovation. But really sometimes that wasn't happening organically, just kind of commuting in and commuting out. So we wanted to make something that caused intersections between all of these different people from different companies and sort of broke down the four walls of the institutions, come together through music, and who knows, maybe it sparks collaboration in the day job, or at least just provides a respite from work.
Staying with you, Elena, for a second, all 70 players are from a biomedical company in and around Kendall Square?
We're primarily from science and tech companies. I would say well over 90% of us, but we are we're not excluding anyone. So if there's somebody else that wants to play with us and find out about it, we'll certainly.
And you're a Pfizer person who's a violinist as well at the same time,
Well,
correct?
I just wondered, I mean, again, you're great musicians, otherwise you wouldn't be at Symphony Hall. So is there some connection between tech and music that...
Well, that's an excellent question.
Well,
I would say it's full of overachievers.
Is that it? Okay.
Well, like our principal oboe, he studied oboe at Cincinnati Conservatory, then got a master's in conducting at Juilliard.
Oh my God.
And that wasn't enough, so he went and got a PhD in biochemistry at Harvard.
Okay.
By the way, Christo, I resent a little bit the fact that when you walked over, you didn't thank me for your career. But I've explained to people, here's some sound from an interview we did. This is in 2015 with Landmarks Orchestra's Christopher Wilkins, who was with us just recently before his retirement, and Joe Francis Minor. There was a third person with them in the studio. Now, sadly, he was a budding assistant director, but we didn't have enough microphones for him. Here's what transpired.
Boy, let me tell you, if this orchestra is 1/10 as good as the enthusiasm level of you two, it must be spectacular.
We have fun.
You're
Fun
both
is
good.
core business.
And Christo, if you work really hard, next time you'll get a mic. You know what I mean? If you work really hard in the next year. Good to meet all three of you.
So what do you want to say to me? Thank you.
Thank you.
You're very. How did you get? I mean, it is incredible. One of my coworkers reminded me about this morning. Now I remember it. It's incredible. How'd you get involved with this deal?
Breakfast.
Yeah.
That's always a good bonding kind of thing. Explain it.
So Elena plays in a community orchestra out in Hudson, Massachusetts. And the music director is an old mentor of mine. And when she and Kelly had this idea, she asked him for advice, and he said, "Oh, you have to talk to Cristo."
Yep.
Yeah.
I love that.
was it.
So what are we going to hear? By the way, you're going to come back and talk about this terrific concert on Monday. Is that right? It's Monday. Is it
on
not?
Monday, yeah.
Monday. We'll talk about that in a minute. But tell us what we're first going to hear, the first selection. Christo.
So this is from Imogen Holst, daughter of Gustav Holst, composer of The Planets. It's a really beautiful quintet. She was an amazing composer, conductor, musicologist, kind of everything that you could possibly do in the music world.
So do you two have to go over there, or you don't?
I
you
do.
Well, then you should go over there. Quietly put that down. It's very sensitive. Thank you very much, Elena. Very nicely done. She's about to play the violin, and we're about to hear the Kendall Square Orchestra play for us here at the library. Welcome to all of you, by the way. It's really thrilling to have you here. Thanks so much for doing it. Take it away. Orchestra.
Do you want to tell us the names of the performers, or shall I? You go ahead.
So on first violin is Sophia.
Hi, Sophia.
There are incredible Elena on second violin. On first cello, Alan Todambaras. Second cello, Lena Shu. And then our own Victoria on viola.
That's fabulous. That was really. So are these all science geniuses, these people, Elena, or what's the deal?
Overachievers, that's what Chris
They are,
said.
overachievers, okay, fine.
Absolutely. So what is this Science Club for Girls deal? You're raising, this concert on Monday is going to be raising money for the Science Club for Girls.
Well, Symphony for Science, just in general, it really brings to life what an orchestra is about. Because when you think about an orchestra, it's an organism, a place where many different kinds of people of every shape, size, background come together, prepared to play their part, put that into the orchestra in order to be part of something that's larger than themselves. And so Symphony for Science takes that to the next level. Do you want to add to that?
So much in the same way that the different parts come together in an orchestra, it really takes a community to support a lot of the causes we care about. And so in Kendall Square Orchestra, we have a lot of things we care deeply about, and we focused on different causes through the years. This is our 3rd annual concert, and this year we're benefiting Science Club for Girls. And so Science Club for Girls is a Cambridge-based organization that provides access to STEM literacy and mentorship for girls and gender-expansive youth from underrepresented backgrounds locally. And as a female scientist myself, I'm acutely aware that we still have some ways to go to achieve gender parity in the STEM workforce. And so this cause is close to my heart and many of us. And we teamed up with them to really help amplify their cause and raise awareness, funds, and hope for what they're doing.
Christos, correct me if I'm wrong, and many, if not most, of the composers whose work you're playing are women and or activist types in addition to their composing work. Is that true?
Yeah, so we programmed quite specifically to the theme of the evening. It's actually half men and half women. So like you just heard Imogen Holst, we're going to be playing her father's Gustav Holst from the planets, the Jupiter movement. And Gustav Holst had egalitarian views. He was the teacher at St. Paul's Girls' School in London his entire life. And Imogen is like a perfect representation of what his focus was, because his daughter did everything possible you could do in music.
You know, we talk a lot about how work has changed during the pandemic. You know, you're hybrid, you're at work or whatever. After you leave, we're talking about basically jerk bosses, people that drive you crazy at the office. This must change things dramatically about your feelings about work to come together and rehearse and practice all this music.
Well, the orchestra is an outlet for people come to a K2O rehearsal with all the stresses of the day. And, you know, they do everything from lead entire companies to being coders at Google, for example. And they come to rehearsal with all those stresses, and then by the end, they're just like cleansed and relieved. I actually was at Walden Pond just the other weekend trying to pay a ticket, and I was jumped by this guy in the woods. It was one of our violists.
Oh, that's great.
He saw me a mile away, and he ran through the woods and said, "Christo, I'm here with my wife. I need to see you." And he explained how he just comes to rehearsal with a lot of stress, and he walks away like a blank slate. And that's exactly what music can do for all of us.
Before you tell us what is going to be played and play it, Elena, can you flesh out a little bit the Science Club for Girls deal? Is really we talked. Was it Nova or I always forget Frontline? Did Nova do this brilliant thing with that woman who was a scientist at MIT and how they rose up against the patriarchy there a few years ago?
Yeah, that's
how they
right.
were the worst offices, the small. I mean, everybody knows the story. Not to mention prizes. What's the Science Club for Girls?
Yeah, so the Science Club for Girls offers a STEM education and also mentorship. It serves girls and gender-expansive youth, grades K through 12, based right in Cambridge. Their programming is free, and it really gives the role models that you need in order to be able to know that you can access a field in STEM.
So, Krista, what are we going to hear this time?
Now it's Florence Price, whom we're also featuring on Symphony for Science. She was the first black female composer to ever have a major work played by a major American orchestra.
And we're going to tell you in a minute, by the way, when
and
they're
she
done
studied
how to
in
get tickets.
Boston,
Oh,
of
she
all
did?
places, yeah.
My gosh.
So are you playing this round, Elena, or what's the deal?
Yeah, I'm going to play again.
Well, this is the point at which I say, get over there.
So while she's getting over there, somebody can help me out, maybe one of the cellists over there. There was a great story about a very aged cellist who had arthritis, and he would sit down to play, and as he played, the arthritis would loosen in his fingers. Anybody ever hear about that? I should look it up. I'm going to look it up.
I actually don't know it.
Yeah, it's a great story. If we can Google that, I will tell you.
Okay, here's the second selection from the Kendall Square Orchestra. For playing for us. You were wonderful. We really, really appreciate it. We're going to tell you in a second how to get tickets.
Yes, we are. First, we want to thank everybody for coming in again. The co-founder and president, CEO of the Kendall Square Orchestra, Elena Spencer. We've been talking to her, and of course, musical director, Cristo Candaci. Thank you both very much for coming in, and congratulations on such absolutely gorgeous music. Beautiful. What a great idea to do this. What a great idea. Yes. Kendall Square Orchestra's annual Symphony for Science is Monday night at Boston Symphony Hall. You can get tickets at bso.org/events. That's bso.org/events, and it's a great cause, the Science Club for Girls. What's it? I got the name wrong. What's it called? The
Science Club for Girls.
Science Club for Girls. Okay.
Thank you all.
Okay,
You were all
thank you
great.
very much.
You guys were great too.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Coming up, we're going to now move from function at the workplace and unity at the workplace and beautiful music at the workplace to dysfunction at the workplace. We're going to open the lines to hear about the people you really can't stand at work. The person who's always standing in your way, ruining your day, driving you absolutely crazy. We're doing this mostly because there's a long line of people at the offices here at GBH that Jim can put on his list. Some of them I haven't seen in a long time. I'm wondering what happened to them. Anyway, we're going to talk about that next. Our number is 877-301-8970. You can call us, you can text us, or you can email us at bprwgbh.org. We are live at the Boston Public Library.
Just who is Generation Z?
We're still optimistic and we're still hungry.
I see a generation that is empowered. We are the generation that has always had answers to our questions.
We're taking a deep dive into the myths and the realities of this diverse, digital, change-making generation. That's next time on The Takeaway from WNYC and PRX.
This afternoon at 2, here on GBH News 89.7.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you. And Boston Ballet, presenting Swan Lake, an iconic and beloved ballet live at the Citizens Bank Opera House, May 26th through June 5th. Tickets at bostonballet.org. And the Boston Public Market in downtown Boston, offering fresh, regionally sourced food, prepared meals, and specialty items from 30 local farmers and artisans. This message funded by the Massachusetts Office of Travel and Tourism.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy and Marge Regan live at the Boston Public Library, as we are every Tuesday and Friday. We've talked a lot on the show about our feelings for West Virginia Senator Joe Manchin. We talked to Marty Walsh about his relationship with Joe Manchin. He was kinder than we are. Regularly, this solitary senator, or one of two, serving as the executioner of key parts of Joe Biden's agenda. So when we saw a piece in the Washington Post with this headline, we couldn't resist. The headline was, "Who is your work, Joe Manchin?" Ashley Fetters Malloy writes in the Post, quote, "For as long as humans have worked together as colleagues, pain in the neck coworkers have been ruining their days at the office. You could call this person the thorn in your side, the sniper who's got all your big ideas right in their crosshairs, the practical, sad trombone Toby to your perhaps overly ambitious Michael Scott." That's obviously from The Office. We're opening the phone lines and text lines to hear about your offices, Joe Manchin, that nemesis who always is standing in your way, your annoying office saboteur. How have they killed your office dreams? Or if they have not, how did you successfully deal with him or her? You can call us or text us at 877-301-8897. Your email us at ppr@wgbh.org. Now, so how have you
Jim,
dealt with some of your nemesis?
Hold on. I really think you're the man to begin this conversation. You could tell us how you've dealt with the many office nemesis you've had to deal with over the years.
Well, I
haven't seen them in a long time.
My attitude,
they've been disappeared. Some
about
of us think.
I don't know about disappearing. My office about an office
Sleeping
nemesis.
with the fishes?
If they just have a different opinion, my attitude is, well, I will coexist with you beautifully. And now my attitude generally is that one of the most important things in life is to have a long memory. And if someone has done you wrong, and there's no worse place to have been done wrong than at the office, where you have to spend a third of your life. How should I put this? It is fair game to return the favor. And so on a couple of occasions, I have attempted to, how would I put this?
Really?
Get rid of the, or urge the getting rid of some of these nemesis, who, by the way, in a moment of seriousness, can really ruin the lives of coworkers. I mean, really ruin them. And by the way, I'm not talking about sexual harassers and things where they're breaking the law in addition to everything else. Obviously, they should be taken care of. But there are people whose annoying level is really high on the 1 to 10 scale who don't deserve to have the space and time to make you or your coworkers' lives miserable. So we want to know what your experiences have been. Have you just grinned and borne it, or bared it? What's the verb?
You grinned and bared it.
Bared it. Okay. Have you grinned and bared it, or have you taken action? If you have, you don't need to name names, but feel free to. Tell us exactly how you deal with this. Now, you are a grin and bear it kind of person for the most part, because you are far nicer than I am, which everybody knows.
Well, every little thing doesn't upset me the way it upsets you.
You think it upsets me?
I do. Yes, I do.
Well, I would argue a small slight is a slight, and nevertheless, and deserves recompense or whatever that word is.
No, I think your texts, your emails, your calls, I mean, you've really elevated this
to an art form. Thank you very much.
Jim. You really
thank you.
Elevated it to an art form.
I really appreciate your compliment.
Okay, let's start with Dan in the car. What do you think, Dan?
Hey, Dan, what's up?
Hey, first time, long time.
Thanks.
Marjorie, you're amazing. Jim, you're Jim.
Yeah, exactly.
This is what I gotta say.
My point exactly. Go ahead. Go ahead.
I cannot stand our finance department.
Fabulous.
Why do I need to itemize my receipts?
Beautiful.
And then tell you what the receipt is in the program? Obviously, if it's a food receipt, it's a food receipt.
Mm-hmm.
Why do I need to tell 4 people that?
That's a good
one. Well, let me tell you, that is appropriate
good one.
righteous anger. Now, what have you done about the finance people at your company because of their mistreatment of you and others, Dan?
Well, I keep on submitting my receipts incorrectly, and they keep on throwing them back.
Beautiful.
So all I'm doing is hurting myself.
That's a beautiful story. Well, you're not quite there yet, but Dan, we wish you a lot of luck. Thank you very much.
The people that take the expense people, you have to be very nice to these expense people, correct? Or then you won't get your expenses covered, and you will be in big trouble.
That is correct. I mean, it's sort of like when you and I discuss every year around Christmas time, why do you tip the mail deliverer? You do it because it's a decent thing and because you don't want your mail in the garbage. That's another
right.
reason.
Or
good
your
reason.
mail collected and left in the mailman's home has happened to me in my neighborhood. I told
Didn't the
you that
guy
story many
mailman
times.
die with all your mail in his house?
Not just my mail. Hundreds
Thousands
and hundreds
of
of
pe-
people.
yeah.
And you wonder why you wouldn't be getting your bills, or when
Yeah.
they would call you and say, well, haven't you paid your bill? Well, I haven't gotten, this is when before everybody did it online. And when the poor mailman expired, floor to ceiling in his house, in his apartment, were thousands and thousands of pieces of mail.
That's sort of payback, don't you think? I mean, that's sort of
That's
what
right.
I don't think anybody should
nobody
be
gave him a
killed
tip,
for
and
it.
he said, we'll get even. We won't deliver their mail for 20 years.
Amy in a car, you are next on Boston Public Radio. The question is, who is your Joe Manchin at your workplace? Hi, Amy.
Hi, I just wanted to give a recommendation. My husband used to work for a very large organization in Boston and had to coexist with some people on his team. And there were a couple of people that he just couldn't wrap his head around their behavior. And eventually a psychologist recommended to him a book that was so unbelievably helpful. He has recommended it to so many people because sometimes the human brain can't understand why someone acts the way that they do. And anyway, the book is called The Sociopath Next Door.
The Sociopath Next Door.
Well, it doesn't get much better than that.
I know it sounds extreme, but like he read it and he was like, oh, it's not me. And it really, really helped him. So I thought I'd call, and for all those people out there that, like you said, they have to coexist and people are driving them crazy. It kind of gives you a better understanding of how other people might be operating.
So how did it change? How did it make him better able to deal with the sociopath next door or in the next cubby or whatever?
Well, because when someone's behavior is like really wacky, the human behavior is we look at ourselves to be like, okay, well, it must be me.
That's a great
what
point.
am I doing?
That's a great point.
And the book helped him see that, in fact, it wasn't him, and gave him a lot of strategies to coexist peacefully
That's
with
great.
these people. So
Well,
it's really helpful.
We really appreciate the recommendation. I don't have to read the book because I've never thought it was me, actually. But for those who do
No,
think the problem is
everyone
them,
else thinks it might be
the
you, Jim.
sociopath next door. Amy, thanks for the call, and thank your husband for the recommendation, too.
You know what I think is a very common thing, and I've never been in management, and I'm glad I've never been in management because it would be too difficult for me to manage anyone. But people who try to claim credit for work you've done, they try to claim credit for
Never
your
happens to
ideas.
women, does it?
Oh, that's one of the big things all the time, that you'll be at some meeting and it will be, there'll be 4 women and 15 men, and a woman will raise her hand with an idea, and everyone just kind of looks at it and says, ridiculous. And then the next meeting, the next week, the guy in the office makes the same suggestion, and everybody thinks it's a great idea. Or the other one is when you do a joint project with someone, and actually you've done like 80% of the work, and then the other person with you organizes the boss, as you would say, Jim,
That's my
to
expression,
believe
yeah.
that they have done 80% of the work and you were just kind of tagging along. There are a lot of people like that. You know what I mean?
I do.
They organize the boss, and you can't figure out how do they get away with it, because they're clearly not very good at what they do, but the boss always defends them. What's that about, Jim?
Well, it's because they're, quote, organizing the boss. I mean, the goal is to convince him or her that you, flaws and all, are indispensable to his or her success. And you know the names of people who I've worked with who have talked about elevating something to an art form in pretty recognizable names, too, in Greater Boston, who have really done spectacular work. Having said that, you're ridiculing me, as you occasionally do.
I am.
Are you happier, for example, there was a person who shall remain unnamed.
Are you going to talk about my insurance again?
What?
You're going to talk about health insurance again?
No, well, I
Okay.
would. It's fine.
It's okay. You've already told that many times.
Well, so never enough times. No, I was going to say there was a person who we all thought was a harassing manager. Is he working with us anymore?
No, he's not.
And is that a better place for it?
No, listen, I will give you credit, Jim.
Thank you.
You took care of that.
I did take care of that.
Never seen him again.
No, we have. You can't keep saying that. We have not seen him. But if you Google him, he appears to still be with us.
That's
as far as we know, we're not 100% sure.
I think he might be living in a different country.
We're not talking about offing somebody.
No,
we're
we're
talking
not.
about somebody. By the way, if someone treats you horrible at the workplace, they don't deserve. If you're a decent, principled person and they're just a saboteur, I mean, in a real moment of seriousness, they don't deserve to be at the workplace. And if your boss won't take care of it, then you have to help.
Sociopath or Us is getting some.
The book?
Yeah, people
What are they saying?
They online. They think it's very good. So
Really?
there you go. Julie in the car. Thank you for calling.
Hey, Julie, what's up?
Hey, well, I used to work for a large Boston nonprofit that you may know,
Mhm.
and I had worked there for almost 20 years, and it really changed over those 20 years. And it was no longer the place I wanted to work, and my vice president was quite abusive. And so I had arranged to merge my department with another one, and the other woman said she would be the director of both departments. I went to my vice president with the plan, and I said, so since many layoffs are going on, why don't you lay me off? I'm expensive. And she said, no, if you want to quit, quit. Why do you want me to lay you off? I said, well, after 20 years, I deserve the severance. And she said, nope, I'm not going to do it. I said, all right, well, then the worst that can happen is you'll continue to pay me and I'll continue to work here. So I waited her out for about 3 months,
Love that.
and she laid me off.
So how great do you feel about that victory? Is that satisfying, Julie, or what?
That was so sweet, so sweet.
Beautiful. Julie, you're the person we're looking for. Thank you for the call. We appreciate
Listen
it.
to another good book for this kind of thing.
What's that?
I love this title. Snakes in Suits When Psychopaths Go to Work. How do you like that one?
I
And
like
look
it.
at this texter. This texter says, when my mother-in-law died, the HR lady gave me her condolences as she was going to the bathroom, I assume in the stall.
Well, I mean, there you are. You know, by the
You
way,
shouldn't talk to people in the bathroom, in the stall.
don't agree with
That's
that
my
at
rule
all.
of thumb.
I
You
don't
shouldn't
agree.
really. No, I don't think that's a good idea.
by the way, I've mentioned this before, but I know people are texting and saying, can you give us some examples, Jim, of your best work?
Mhm.
And I'm happy to. Probably the thing for which I am best known, and I will tell this because it really amuses Marjorie, is I used to work at legal services in the thank you, whoever you are,
Whoop.
in the South Bronx.
Yep.
And we had an executive director who came from Miami who didn't treat us terribly well. So, and we couldn't get rid of him as much as we tried. So what we decided to do, which I think was totally reasonable, when he went back to Miami to visit friends, he was gone for 2 weeks, we decided to throw a huge neighborhood going away party for him when he returned. We were at 149th and 3rd in the South Bronx, and literally as he turned the corner on 3rd Avenue, there was a crowd of maybe 1,000 people, many of our clients, community leaders, etc., cheering and saying, goodbye, Lloyd, we'll really miss you. And you know what he did a week later?
He quit.
He quit. So
That was brilliant.
That was.
I've gotta
I'm really
say,
proud.
That was absolutely
And
brilliant.
by the way, if it wasn't clear, he had no intention of quitting until we had the going away party, and it obviously worked. So you do what you got to do.
Here's a good text.
Yeah.
If you work in politics or government, you can drop a dime to the Boston Globe.
That's great.
Just saying.
Nope. None of us have ever done that, have we?
I think lots of people have done that, and we're very glad they do. How would you find out about anything that was sneaky that was going on in politics if you didn't have dime droppers to
I'd
the
never
Globe,
do
Jim?
that. Kathy and Medway, you're next on Boston Public Radio. We're talking about who is your Joe Manchin at work. Hi there, Kathy.
Hi.
Hi.
I have an example of two people that I've worked with in the past, and both of them were ranked higher than me and decided to take me down in public for no reason whatsoever. And so what I did was I just relied on what my father always told us when we were children, and I said, you can't talk to me like that. And they never did again.
There you go.
So
you have to stand up
And
to
how,
those people, Kathy.
again, I'll ask the same question of you that I asked the prior caller. How good does it feel when you stand up to that bully, that Manchin, and it works? Is that like one of the most satisfying things you've ever experienced, Kathy?
yeah, it's great. But the sad thing is I see them continue to do it to the people that will put up with it.
Well, that is unfortunate.
Well, that's the
That is
bullying
really
thing that you
unfortunate.
eventually
Kathy,
have to confront
thank you.
the bully, right? That's kind of
You
the
do.
advice your parents give you if a
But
kid
what-
is bullying you.
Yeah, but what Kathy is saying is other people who, for whatever reason, don't confront that bully. So Kathy becomes protected because she had the courage to stand up to him or her, and the other people who don't for totally understandable reasons. It's hard to stand up to a supervisor or a boss. You know, my analysis, for whatever it's worth, I haven't used the Manchin expression, and I mean this sincerely. I am of the belief when all the experts in the business world are listing the reasons for the Great Resignation, I would say a huge part of the reason for the Great Resignation is the contempt that many workers have for their supervisors.
I think a lot of
being
people
treated exactly like Kathy was for years, and because they don't get satisfaction, they can't get rid of their own Joe Manchin. They choose to get rid of themselves, which is really totally unfair.
Listen to this. This is from either a nurse or a physician saying, a middle manager called me out of the exam room with a patient I was worried about having a cardiac event at that moment to tell me she didn't think my shoes met the dress code.
Is that really true? And that's the end of the story?
Yeah, we should. This person, she wants me to keep her name anonymous. You should call back and tell us what happened at the end of that. What was your response to that? But I could see that there are people that they're very petty about those certain things. You know
because
what I mean?
that's the way you show that you have authority over somebody is by.
I worked for a guy once that was really upset about people having things on their desk.
Who's
this?
This
is Boston Magazine a million years ago. We weren't supposed to read the paper at our desk, which I thought was an odd thing.
When you're a
reporter,
reporter,
in those days, everybody read the paper at their desk. We didn't have computers then, and but you had to have. And not only that, you had to sign in and sign out. If you're going out to get coffee, you had to sign in and sign out. Everybody just hated him. You know what I mean? They were treating you like you were all thieves and messy people. And we got our revenge, Jim. I'll just
can I tell you, we are out of time, but I want to make an offer to the audience, but like that person who just texted a minute ago.
Yep.
If you've got a Joe Manchin in your office who you can't deal with, I will help you throw him or her a going away party. I mean, it worked really well in the South Bronx, and it'll work at your workplace too. So
did you hear
just give me a
Marty
buzz.
Walsh saying he went down to West Virginia? He's with Joe Manchin.
Well,
they
you
went
gotta
down
work.
the
You
mine.
gotta. I mean, you're the one who is criticizing Biden for not being able to turn around Manchin's vote. You think Marty Walsh went down there because he wanted to have fun in a coal mine with Manchin? He wanted to try to move him on an issue. He's doing what you got to do so that people like you don't complain.
I think we need more LBJ action. You know what I mean?
They should have sealed the mine. Not with Marty in it, or not with the secretary in it, but no. By the way, I didn't mean that. Thank you, but that's going to get me in trouble. That was a joke.
That was a joke. That was a joke.
Never.
Okay,
I love
Jim.
Joe Manchin. I was only kidding.
Okay.
So,
okay. We are done.
Good
Thank
luck
you
to
very
him
much for
on his yacht. His
listening
daughter
to another
raising the price
of EpiPens.
That's
by
right.
600%. That's right.
Good
so
for
little
them.
kids couldn't get them.
It's
Thank you
fabulous.
to people
Thank
that
you
came
all
down
for
to the
coming. We
library.
appreciate it.
I'm glad people had a chance to see Marty
he's a
Walsh.
really good guy.
And the Attorney General. Anyway, keep up with us 24/7 by way of our podcast. On Monday, we're going to be joined by the Republican who's running for Charlie Baker's seat and one of Maura Healey's rivals. That would be former state rep Jeff Deal. We've talked to him a lot before. He's coming in on Monday. We'll also have food writer Corby Kummer, the Reverends Irene Monroe and Emmett G. Price III, and the inaugural poet Richard Blanco. We want to thank our crew, Zoe Matthews, Aidan Conley, Mackenzie Farkas, Rebecca Tauber, our engineer, John LaClaw Parker, our executive producer, Jamie Bologna, and a special thanks to the BPL engineering team, Colin Cockrell, Sai Patel, and Angelica Marrero. Thank you very much.
Jamie, speaking of next time back at the library on Tuesday, is Secretary Esper on Tuesday? Former Secretary of Defense Esper, who has just written for Donald Trump, who's just written a book, and that's where the story comes from about the President of the United States asking his Secretary of Defense if he could shoot protesters, only in the legs, of course. And so we will be joined live in the library, if you join us on Tuesday, by Secretary of Esper, formerly of the Trump administration.
Thank you very much, Jim. You've done a nice job.
Well, I think I've done a fine job, and you've done a fine job, too. I want you to know, from me to you.
Okay.
Thank you all.
I'm Marjorie Egan.
I'm Jim Browdy.
Thanks again for tuning in.
Thanks for coming, everybody. We appreciate it.
Hope you have a nice
Have a great
weekend.
week.
And watch
90s.
out for the 90-degree
Love every
weather.
minute.
And hope you can tune in on Monday. Bye.
Bye.